All right, Vladimir, if you don't end that war in Ukraine in 50 days, I'm gonna do something very strong.
Oh, God, this again. Okay, right, cool.
What's that? Cool? I'll show you cool. Now you have 10 days. Okay, maybe 12.
Love it, can't wait.
Okay, that's it.
Ow!
Holy shit!
Why did you hit me? Why did you hit me?
Look, somebody's gonna pay the price for Vladimir not listening to me, and it's not gonna be me, all right?
But he is also helping Russia. More than I'd like to, less than I could.
Yeah, well, but he's, he and I were talking. It's a little, it's more complicated. It's, look, I'm just glad we're not talking about Jeffrey Epstein, huh?
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Tuesday, August 5th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Thought we'd start with something a little lighter today. I thought that was funny. And it's not just about one side of the paradigm. It's pretty much just everybody in politics today and everybody, especially in American politics. But it's just interesting to see how, obvious a lot of this stuff is. Now, we're not going to get into the tariffs today. We're not going to get into a couple of the points that you could kind of glean from that conversation. But it's just interesting to see the bluster and the game and yet how many people will just follow suit with what the people in the screen, I call the screamers, the people at the top of the false two-party paradigm, just pointing you in the direction they want you to go in. But it's very obvious is the point of that clip today. It's just, I know it's hard. It's easy to fall into your, I guess your echo chamber is the best word for it. But the reason I hesitate on that word is because if you're aware of that, is it the same term? I guess so. The point though is that, I think we try hard in this community to think about, to at least do our best to reflect on how that can happen. Because let's be clear, it can happen and it is happening, even though we know about it because of just algorithmic manipulation, the way the technology is going. But point being, I still think regardless of that being said, of the echo chamber, how that can affect the way you see things, I think it's obvious that so many people are starting to question things. And day by day, every single day, it gets more interesting to see the way that this starts to break down and the way that people kind of engage with it, the way that people try to run from it, the way that some people have just never seen it their entire lives, despite how obvious we felt that it was up until now. Regardless, we're here. I think we all see it. And it's interesting to see how the political teams go back and forth, how the Tuckers and the Loomers are fighting about different things. It's just very fascinating. But at the same time, very real. Very real. There's a lot of very obviously real and, human lives being taken every moment in other fields of war. What's going on in this country has very real consequences. What we're going to talk about today is something interesting that was shared with me around a biotech genomics company that surprise, surprise, is very immersed with Israel. And it's not just that being the story, but what happened. They're paying about just shy of $10 million in basically fines for false claims. That thing that Pfizer gets accused of and found guilty of all the time, we don't talk about, which is true. But false claims in regard to the safety, the cybersecurity, more specifically around your genomic data. Well, you know what I've talked about. How long have I said this? Every single time. Is this not what happens every two? Oopsie, we had a cybersecurity issue. Well, this turns out that it wasn't just an issue, that they lied about having security around that. Now, what I find interesting is this is a company that's immersed with Israel. And what's going on is not just Israel, but we know they're a major part in where this direction is going. Remember, Pfizer, they called themselves Pfizer's lab. And there's a reason for that, because this all overlaps with what was being done around that. The genetic engineering, the genetic modification, the genomics in general about your personal genetic information. In regard to the term, it can be applied differently, but that's what I'm discussing, is the information that is very valuable to these companies from your personal, from probably the society in general and their genomic information. And so this was not meant to be public, wasn't meant to be seen or accessed by these governments, but apparently now it can be. And it's interesting to see where this all leads back to. I want to start with that story today because I do find it really interesting as kind of it's a large story, but it really is a microcosm in the larger issue that we're talking about. So we're going to start pretty much with that story, save for a couple of few points I want to get to. We're going to talk about Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein, and the kind of updates to now, which are actually pretty interesting in where this is going. That's kind of what I was touching on in my opening there, the statement about how interesting it is just to watch the way this plays out. It's hard to watch sometimes, how truly embarrassing it is, not just because of how we see it, but like looking at the way conservatives engage with this, Republicans, even team sport politics. It's hard to watch sometimes because it's just so obvious, but it's continuing to break down, which is a good thing, and people are seeing it. But about the potential recording that they might release, what's happened so far in regard to the court process, and my opinion stands the same. We'll go through it. I think we all sense where this is probably going to end up. I hope not. I hope it's more transparent from the most transparent administration in history. You can even say that with a straight face. It's just the same thing with the government we've seen the entire time. It's just your government. They don't have any interest in being honest with you. And the Obama overlap to that, which I think is interesting in regard to what's actually happening. The claims of a grand jury investigation into Obama that doesn't seem to have anything actually happening. They're stating that, but there has not been a single move in that direction as far as I can tell. There has, however, been a move in the direction of subpoenaing, putting out subpoenas for Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, or was it Hillary Clinton? Yeah, it was Hillary and Bill. William Barr, Jeff Sessions, all in relation to Jeffrey Epstein. Very interesting, but same point. I think this is just a dog and pony show. I think these people will be paraded around and make it look crazy, and whether they even show up, and I don't think anything will happen, sadly. I think history has shown us that with the last time Bill and Hillary and others have already been accused with evidence to nail to the wall, and nothing ever happens. We'll talk about what's going on in Gaza and Israel, but as it relates, really, I guess only a couple points to that today. Tomorrow, I'll be doing another show, and we'll talk more about what's going on with that. Very important things continually to talk about as it relates even to Americans. But I want to talk today when we get to it the latter part of the show around, general topic, Israel infiltration of this country, which, we've been ringing that bell for a long time. And I think more than I've ever seen, it's breaking down recently because of the Israel aid, rather the disaster relief aid discussion, which I'm sure you all saw, went across broke the internet, where all of a sudden people were saying, wait a minute, you can't make it a condition to defend Israel or not boycott them. Like most of us are going, where the F have you guys been? Like this has been Hurricane Harvey. And we'll talk about that today. But plenty of other examples. Like I saw Kevin Sorbo go, what the heck? It's like, guys, how is this not public by now? It's like, the interesting part is we shouldn't disparage, like people are seeing it. Fine. Let that be the case. We'll deal with whether or not people are using that truth to get benefit. People that always have been dishonest who want to pretend that they're now seeing it. The point is acknowledge that people are seeing it. And we're going to get into the overlap of that infiltration that as it pertains to relief aid, but also just the bigger picture of what we are now seeing and how it is continuing to break down, that people are seeing it more and more every second right now. George Galloway calls out the Wailing Wall discussion. And I'm thinking to myself, man, at what point have we criticizing them going to the Wailing Wall, even in the context he did, which is completely accurate. It's not about religion, or it is, but it's in the sense that it's an oddity, the way that Christians, we'll get into it. My point is that that's even still being called racist, but a couple years ago, that would have been like ostracized from society. And it's just shifting. People are starting to recognize that it doesn't make much sense. Even if it's just our government recognizing that Israel has that much power and willing to just feign that interest so they get that influence, that's still a political dishonesty. But we know it goes further than that. So we're going to go into that quite deep at the end today. But let's start with, just this first part, just to shout out the person I got that from. Shay Bose played that shared that clip. I just think it is funny. Again, it is sometimes just worth letting a little steam out. Not everything has to be the end of the world. And I do think that's an entertaining clip to look at, even though it is, crazy. It's real what's going on, how cartoonish that is. But let's start with some health stuff this is something that I really want to get into. And I'm not going to play this whole thing. It's about 21 minutes. Couple points about health, then we'll get into the overlap of Illumina Inc., which is the company we're talking about, the biotech company, which is obviously around health. But this is a documentary, a 21-minute kind of mini doc around East Palestine. The title for this More Perfect Union, how a multi-billion-dollar company blew up a train and got away with it. So I'm going to play a couple points on this. I have three things I wanted to point out. And we'll just start with the opening and then show you a couple things that stand out. Now, that you guys that have already watched this, you already know. Moral of the story, nothing's changed. Nobody was helped. People are still struggling. Norfolk Southern, as far as I can tell, has gained tremendously from the situation. My personal opinion. But it's important to understand what's still going on. And the point that I think stands out is that a lot of these people were convinced that if Trump got into power, everything would change. Guess what didn't change? You'll hear from them yourself.
My heart's kind of pitter-pattering. Just sitting here with these memories and looking around. It's kind of making the hair stand up on the back of my neck, and I feel like I might puke.
Yeah.
Like, this is what they did to us. This is what they did to our community. And it all started right here.
Yeah.
The last time I was in East Palestine, things were pretty different.
Look at those flames. Look at that shit.
The town is under a state of emergency after 50 train cars derailed, causing a massive fire a half-mile long, which lit up the night sky and burned for hours.
I'm from this county. I went to their high school dances, barbecues, and I was there a few weeks after the derailment to document the unfolding man-made disaster.
Do I have to wait until I have cancer before you guys are going to do anything?
Why the fuck would you let Norfolk do that? Like, why would you let them clean up their own mess?
2 years later, East Palestine is quiet.
It's the Twilight Zone. It's like living on this movie set, this fantasy world.
But behind the scenes, a much bigger scandal is still unfolding.
Every one of these little stories in of itself is shocking, but the totality of it, like, we have been stabbed in the back by everyone.
Do you feel like Norfolk Southern paid as big a price as you did?
You got to be outside your mind. You must be outside your mind.
I wish there was one smoking gun here. The problem is with East Palestine, there's about 30 smoking guns.
There are no accidents. This derailment was 100% preventable.
I'm a Trump supporter. He needs to make this right. He has the ability, the opportunity to.
So it's interesting to me. All these different parts, this is not new, guys. These kind of scenes remind me of Flint, Michigan. They remind me of a lot, quite frankly. And it happens every damn time. People, and it's not always just like one conniving entity, right? But there's just people. It's because of the power structure that has allowed rampant lawlessness to lead the day, where people then recognize the opportunity and they step in everywhere. And things like this, and half the time these places end up worse than they were before, not even because of the accident, but because, obviously part of it, but because the people that come in after the fact and just like vultures. It's funny how we don't even talk about Lahaina anymore. And the point is that there's no real resolution. Do you realize that Flint, Michigan, you know how the end of that sentence goes, right? Still doesn't, it's just insane that we can't look at what that shows us and say, okay, if they never actually solved the Flint water, despite all the big talk and and there was never even accountability, why would we think anything else will be different? That was a criminal act. So too was this, if we're actually going to understand the facts. What's interesting to me, and that point about the 30 smoking guns, this is exactly what we talked about, right? The idea that they were spreading out the issue so that it became so background noise that there was no way to tell the difference, especially now. Good luck trying to prove it now that it's been so long. It could be any number of other things, including the COVID shots that are still hurting people. All these things conflate, and there's a design to that. But I think what's interesting, let's not forget, like everything we've seen since, and especially since people are starting to pay a lot closer attention, is it not the wildest thing in the world that that a movie literally came out called White Noise that showed like the exact same thing in the exact same place? It's just a cartoon. How in the world is that possible, mathematically speaking or not? But let alone all the other things we've seen. I'm not claiming one way or the other. I'm just pointing out exactly what happened and how insane that is. But I think it's worth us considering that there is more going on. especially because of how dark things are starting to get, and not because it's not going, because we're going in the wrong direction. Quite frankly, I think we're finally moving in the direction of truth, and that's why it's getting so complicated, because people in power, or however you want to look at it, have no interest in that, and they're desperate for their own well-being to keep us in this dark. But I just think that's worth noting. Now, I want to jump to 4 minutes and 43, play a couple of points on here that I think are relevant.
Back or something, or when did you move?
We ran out of money. When we left there, I had $40 in my savings account. $40. I'm still suffering health effects, and they want me to go back to this house that I know is not safe to go back to.
To this day.
Now, the more you get into this too, and the more everybody, everywhere, other than people in positions of power, have made it clear that to this very day, people are suffering in their homes, in the area. Now, again, actually, a point of giving somebody credit where it's due. Status Quo, I'm forgetting his off the top. What's the guy's name? I forget off the top. We've interviewed him a long time ago. I've given him. I've called him out for things in the past, but I want to say that's driving me crazy. Give me the name in the chat from Status Quo. He has stuck with things like this for a long time, to the point when clearly that people, it's not as a big story. Clearly, he's invested in getting the truth out about this. And I think that's worthy of note. Regardless of whether we think people are playing partisan politics or whatever, it's very rare that I see people, Jordan Sheridan, thank you, who like even with Flint, that's why I originally interviewed him, because he was still talking about Flint when nobody else was, trying to nail that story and interviewing people. I just think that there's a lot of credit there. And they had done a great job really going after the story. I don't know if they are in the moment, but they had been for a very long time, well past the, whatever the window is, or people think it's worth their time to talk about these things as opposed to just what's important to talk about, I think that's worth pointing out. But there's this part continues right here.
Today, the EPA and the state of Ohio still claim that East Palestine is safe. But in just the last 2 years, hundreds of residents have reported getting sick.
Look at my eyes. I look crazy.
Now, you could clearly point out, to be objective, that some of this could just be other things. Some of this could be, any number of other problems that are actually still going on, like dioxins, and which actually the same conversation. But, things like the COVID-19 side effects, or shots rather, is what I mean, the injections and so on. Now, that's just what things that people would come to mind. Any number of other things that we probably don't even know are going on. The point is, that was what the design was, in my opinion. In one part is, to this point, there's no way you could ever prove that these things are because of what they did. Now, if let's say you start getting test results that show you that you have high levels of dioxins in your blood, that may have some standing. The problem, though, guess what? So too do most of the places in this country. And that's why everyone's getting cancer. At least one of the many reasons, with the glyphosate, with the PFAS, and all the different things that they don't care about. Right. We don't get to talk about this a lot. It's important, and yet nobody likes to hear about it. But let's keep going.
My skin has been red like a lobster.
Federal workers actually got sick while they were surveying in East Palestine after that derailment.
They showed symptoms similar to what other people have been talking about.
I've been diagnosed.
And CDC got sick. EPA got sick. Multiple examples of people in positions of power who had the authority to shut this down got sick and did nothing about it. Could be because they had no power. Could be because they didn't care. At the end of the day, captured agencies, guys. That's where we are. Doesn't seem to have changed even slightly with the current administration.
With asthma, I have periodontal disease and my teeth are falling out. And that's just what I know of.
We sort of heard the messaging that everything was fine.
Okay, let's go to 1650. It's worth your time watching this. There's a good job on this.
Every step of the way, we've had to fight. And that's what I learned. No one's going to fight for us. We have to fight for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how many
Now, that is a message that needs to be taken away from this, guys. Doesn't mean you shouldn't hope for people to help or people in power that you have the ability, but you have to realize that especially when dealing with a government structure, the only person coming to save you is you. That's something we all need to embody.
Politicians I've talked to and how many promised they were going to help, we've had to fight. And that's what I learned. No one's going to fight for us. We have to fight for ourselves. Do you know how many politicians I've talked to and how many promised they were going to help? I didn't give a shit if you're Republican or Democrat. If you would talk to us, we talk to you. Fast forward, J.D. Vance gets elected vice president. I've heard from none of them.
Mm-hmm.
We're still...
Let that sink in a little bit. Now, that doesn't have to be a left-right paradigm thing, guys. It's just politicians who recognize an opportunity to use their plight What'd they do? Biden's ruining this and he didn't help them. How dare he? How dare he not help the people of North Carolina? How dare? And then what are they doing? There's no real material change here, guys. Now, I forgot. They are now conditioning aid for those people on whether or not they boycott Israel. Now, we're going to come back to that. Now, the update on the story is that they've removed it. But from what I can tell, they've added it back. We'll come back to that in a second. So that's wild to me. Now, we'll get to that and we'll check it when we get there. But realize that that is the interesting overlap to this. If you haven't seen that, it's not new, by the way, as we mentioned in the opening, but they're now talking about, the idea that what is it called? Discriminatory racism or something like that. The point being, it literally lists Israel and Israeli companies, and that they will not get aid from your tax dollars if there's a disaster, if they recognize you as boycotting Israel, which, by the way, is your constitutional right. But not any other country, not any other government, just Israel. But America first, right? I think that's super important to think about. And so when none of them are coming back to help, or back to the point of being, opportunism, well, they did that because it was easy to look like you would be there when Biden's not. And then your turn comes around, let's put it this way, so it's not always partisan. The U.S. government would rather work with Norfolk Southern over any of us because they get a benefit from that. There's nothing but cost for us, even though that's what they claim they want to do, even though that's their effing job. The reality is they just have to put out. So when Norfolk saying, hey, we'll work with you, we'll give you money, any number of things you understand that works with, not just the executive branch, guys, all the different multifaceted elements of government that could use and benefit from inside connections to people like that. Now, that's just an overview. Who knows what's really driving it? But at the end of the day, clearly, these people suffered. Norfolk Southern got away with murder. And God knows whatever else happened. Because remember, there's a whole lot of the story, just like every other story since, it seems, that never really gets finished. They rushed it up. They patched it over. They rode back over the stuff. They had to dig it back up. They got that train out as fast as they could before, exploding it, of course, despite the fact that they didn't have to, despite the fact that the evidence in court proved they knew it was treated vinyl chloride and it was not likely to explode, but they did it anyway. Maybe it was an insurance scam. I don't even know.
Sitting here sick. People are still suffering. And where is he? At this point, you see the corruption, the lies from every one of our agencies. Unless the president says we're going to make this right for these people, it'll never be, made right.
Yeah. And, you can even sense right there a willingness to want to support Trump. But her point's the same. He didn't do that. Nobody has. They've all been there. They've talked to people. They're still suffering. Nothing has changed.
In February, Jamie wrote a letter to President Trump, calling on him to sign a major disaster declaration and to deliver universal health care for anyone in East Palestine who needs it.
There's a political universal health care is kind of not their thing, right?
I'm a Trump supporter, but he needs to make this right.
Yep.
Something needs to be done.
See, the problem is that we're also hell-bent on thinking the right side is going to help us, or the right person, that we don't recognize that they're not in the business of helping you. It's like, think of it like an insurance company, guys. They do everything they can to not have to do something for you. That's how this stuff works. I'm sorry to be a pessimist about it, but just look, it's not only one side. That's how the lens works. They look back and they go, the Democrats are always the one. No, it's your government is always in that position. It's not my opinion. Just look. Until we can get beyond that left-right paradigm lie, we're always going to be trapped and we don't see the full picture.
Yeah. Something needs to be done. We went through Biden, who didn't do anything. This is your chance to come here and fix this.
Mm-hmm. Didn't happen. Not going to. 1835, in my opinion. Last part.
It became too much.
I just don't trust their results.
For your own health, for your own sanity, you have to step away from it.
It's a lot of weight for anyone to carry. And for one person that I knew, it became too much.
I just don't trust their results. We're all ending up sick and they're telling us it's safe and everything's at a safe level.
I spoke with Courtney Miller after my last trip to East Palestine. We texted back and forth about how she was getting sick and wasn't getting the answers or the help that she needed. But we were never able to connect in person. That's because on August 21st, 2024, Courtney took her own life. We paid a visit to her home, which sits next to the tracks along the banks of Sulphur Run, one of the most impacted creeks in town. I've spoken to Courtney's family. The wound is still too fresh for them to talk about on camera, but they gave me permission to quote their belief that Courtney's passing was 100% related to the derailment. For the people of East Palestine, what happened on February 3rd, 2023, was a wound. One they may be dealing with for the rest of their lives. For Norfolk Southern, it was just another Friday.
You're from this area.
It just kills me. You know what kills me more than anything, guys? Because we saw it. Plain as day. We called it out. We said what was going on. And I'm not talking about opinions at this point. Like up until there's things that evolved, understanding treated vinyl chloride, but it was very clear, just like every other story it seems since then, where you can clearly see, and I shouldn't be so hyperbolic, but plenty of them, where everyone can see what's going on. We're not children. We recognize the criminal activity. We recognize the way you're trying to cover things up, and it just doesn't stop. I recommend checking this out entirely. I'll also include, for you guys to continue to look through, one of these, I argued two of the most important of the episodes, but there's plenty of them that go along this process. This is the one I keep referencing from 2023. Investigation found East Palestine controlled burn, in quotes, because it was by definition an uncontrolled burn by every expert that understands that, despite how that still doesn't get stated, was unnecessary. That Norfolk lied to the volunteer fire chief by telling him, or rather omitting the fact that he knew, this is what came out in court, that it was treated with vinyl chloride, which means it was likely not to explode regardless of the circumstances in regard to what was happening, and they didn't tell him that. In fact, they let him believe that the pressure was so dangerous that he was on the hook to make this choice. They railroaded him. I believe that's the word even used in court. The craziness about this is that they knew, and it came out, it's public, nothing happened. Nothing. Now, on this one, and this one too, by the way, up to 14,000% more dioxins in East Palestine homes compared to controls. These are scientists doing this. Now, the Scott C. Smith in this case. The crazy thing, when you go back to this video, as much as I do think it was a good video, guess what you won't find in here? Not a single mention of dioxin, which I still find baffling. You understand that even they were forced to admit that that was like one of the primary issues. That came up in the EPA briefings after they pretended they didn't know what was happening, and then they just ignored it. They just shut it down, moved on. No one even brings it up. That's not even, and it's still not mentioned. And crazy enough, in this documentary, they use the term controlled burn. So this is my problem with this stuff, is that we're still trapped every time in these conversations, and it behooves us. It's our responsibility as individuals to call it out, if you care. On other health points, More Perfect Union put this out. Trump on NBC, on CNBC this morning, this I believe was yesterday, will be, or it could have been today, 9 hours ago today, will be putting an initial initial small tariffs on pharmaceuticals. Here's what he says.
And semiconductors. But on pharmaceuticals, we'll be putting a initially small tariff on pharmaceuticals. But in 1 year, 1.5 years maximum, it's going to go to 150%, and then it's going to go to 250%, because we want pharmaceuticals made in our country. And that's not the CHIPS Act like Biden did, because he didn't know what he was doing, where they gave billions of dollars to companies that had more money than they knew what to do with.
President Trump, can I ask you about...
Right. So that's pretty simple, unless you're unless you're still pretending like you don't understand, like unless we're still engaging with either the left lie or the right lie. Like the reality of what this is, there are aspects of this that can potentially benefit you in the long run, and sometimes right away, but it's a tax on you. At the end of the day, that's what this means. It increases, which we're already seeing. So when this happens, it's not a benefit for you. It says, as I wrote anyway, so much for cheaper drugs. Should you incorrectly think that's what you need to be healthy. That's my opinion, of course. #winning. I just think it's insane. We can go from 30 seconds ago, like that was a huge thing, we're changing it for everybody, and then no, we're going to increase it potentially by 250%. Okay, so that's going to be more expensive. Okay, got it. It just doesn't make any sense. Unless it's just profiteering at your expense. Now, this is a very important element of this. This is where the world is. I was going to say it is going, but this is where the world is and is continuing to drive in the direction of. And this is about, everything we've talked about in this bigger field of like genetic modification, genetic editing, gene therapies, genomics, and the kind of AI drug direction. That's what this is all really about. And not just that even, but also from the AI side of it and the creating drug side of it, using the genomic information to better create whatever they're trying to create, including weapons and dual use, but also just AI language model information. Like they're using this in so many different ways. But the one I want to focus on is the idea that we're talking about a kind of Wild West race to the end to get as much of the information they possibly can, whether it's Doge and Elon Musk and his, or whatever it is, as fast as they can. Everyone seems to be rushing to absorb as much data as possible, and what that then is being used for. And we see this happening. And so in this case, if we recognize a company that clearly is caught not just like failing to keep you safe, but lying about even intending to do so, how do you not read that as some kind of a ploy? Right? So Illumina Inc. is to pay $9.8 million to resolve False Claims Act allegations arising from cybersecurity vulnerabilities in genomic sequencing systems. The point is, so their vulnerabilities are basically their false claims around being able to keep your personal genomic data secure, and they failed. So it says the settlement resolves allegations that between February 2016 and September 2023, Illumina sold government agencies genomic sequencing systems that's with software that had cybersecurity vulnerabilities. And this is where I think it's important to think about this exact thing happening in everything Israel seems to touch. Everything Israel's involved in, and all the different, solar winds and all. I mean, it's, oopsie, it's something that Israel's touching, but it was them, it was China. It's like, okay, maybe, or maybe it was exactly what Israel builds into these things and pretends to be other companies or pretends to be other countries. I'm not saying I know every single time, but that is a very, very real and constant thing. As we'll, again, in a second, play the clip, or actually, that would have been good here too. Maybe I'll play it both times. The clip of what the pager discussion, where they say that we create fake companies and we can do it anywhere in the world and it's our stage. That's the way they see this, the Israeli government. So the point here is that the vulnerability we should consider very well have been by design, to scoop this stuff up and not actually have anything to stop them from accessing it. Or you can consider it from the side of Illumina not being aware that they have backdoor access from a company or a rather infrastructure they work with. You'll see what I mean as we go through it. So it says, had cybersecurity vulnerabilities without having an adequate security program and sufficient quality systems to identify and address those vulnerabilities. So yeah, you could always claim incompetence. As I always say, they would always rather be seen as incompetent than criminal. Specifically, the United States contended that Illumina knowingly, that's what I find interesting, that they're claiming, the U.S. government, that they knowingly failed to incorporate product cybersecurity in its software design, development, installation, and on-market monitoring. Failed to properly support and resource personnel, systems, and processes tasked with product security. Basically, every aspect of it. Failed to adequately correct design features that introduce cybersecurity vulnerabilities in the genomic sequencing systems, and falsely represented that the software on the genomic sequencing systems adhered to cybersecurity standards. How are you possibly, clearly the U.S. is saying they did it on purpose, but I don't trust governments. You shouldn't blindly take their word for anything. But with that outline, and this does seem to be what the information shows, I don't know how you could argue that is in any way an accident. In every step of the way, it seems like they made sure that this was not, or rather just vulnerable, is the way to put it. And it goes on to say, and falsely represented the software on the genomic sequencing systems adhered to cybersecurity standards, including standards of the International Organization for Standardization and National Institute of Standards and Technology. So if they're claiming it was knowingly, how can you make sense of that? Why would they knowingly keep a vulnerable backdoor, or rather just, I see it that way, but that's what it represents, but a vulnerability in the supposed security around that very, very, very valuable genomic data that they swore that would never, ever see the light of day in the context of, outside of whatever your personal use was in the testing and for your personal data of, 23andMe and the whole thing, right? So obviously, then that would, to me, suggest that they did that if it's knowingly, to allow access to it. Because otherwise, there's no other logical reason somebody would allow there to be a vulnerability in something they promised they would be secure. So that's just my opinion, but you tell me what you think. It says, quote, companies that sell products to the federal government will be held accountable, the federal government says, for failing to adhere to cybersecurity standards and protecting against cybersecurity risks. Okay. So if the company is held accountable for something that happened there, shouldn't it be considered from the investigatory team, whether or not that was is it their fault Did they? And if so, if it is, then why would they do that? Like, it seems like a hollow investigation is to be like, you're getting fined because you did that. Why did they do that? And who got access to it? Don't you think it's like the whole Epstein thing. It's like, we're just pointing to the surface level. What about the team? What about the list? What about the people involved? What about the clients? Like, that's, to me, I think that speaks volumes. And so it says, Shumate of the injustice. Oh, no, excuse me. That's the name. So it says, failing to standards and failing to adhere to cybersecurity standards and protecting against cybersecurity risks, said Assistant Attorney General Brett A. Shumate of the Justice Department Civil Division. Quote, this settlement underscores the importance of cybersecurity and handling genetic information and the department's commitment to ensuring that federal contractors adhere to requirements to protect sensitive information from cyber threats. Okay, I mean, you failed, right? And it's like, so here's the thing. Did they just take their word for it? Right? Like, the idea is that you said you were secure. They didn't really care, even seem to feign or even try, other than saying it, to have the security. And you're now going, well, now we're going to hold you accountable. Well, clearly you're not doing that. Clearly you are reactive. Oh, you failed. Okay, now you're in trouble. Well, that's not what people want from you. I'm not saying I want them involved at all. I'm just saying, from the logic of what they claim, then they should be doing their job if that's what you see what I'm saying? It seems to be backward. But it says, this settlement demonstrates our continuing commitment to combat cybersecurity risks by ensuring that federal contractors protect private and sensitive government information. Or, I mean, when's the last time your government cares about that? They sell you out every turn possible. Okay, so that's simple enough. Illumina Inc. lied, or I guess just spectacularly failed, and the U.S. government thinks that was on purpose. First, one of their main locations is in Tel Aviv, but that doesn't have to. It's not earth-shattering. That's they're a major hub in regard to the biotech field, which concerns me, or the technology, or weapons manufacturing, or rather just invest or research. But that's the first part. The one I thought was most interesting is right in the midst of the COVID-19 illusion, Illumina made a massive partnership with the Israeli Ministry of Health to pilot genomic sequencing for diagnosing critically ill infants. Okay, so then now you have a partnership. You have the Israeli Ministry of Health, their government, overlapped with Illumina in regard to this massive genomic sequencing effort. And so a group that's just almost constantly being caught for backdoor cyber manipulation, Israel, constantly happening, has an agreement with them for genomic information. Not that they always have access to everything, but the research, right? So my point is, if you're thinking about who might be manipulating this, Israel is known for creating backdoors to do something like that. And the continued overlaps seem to make sense. This is what it said. I mean, just really quickly, Illumina and Israel's Ministry of Health on Wednesday announced a pilot program to implement the use of whole genomic sequencing for diagnosing critically ill infants in neonatal intensive care who are suspected of having a genetic disorder. And that just goes on to give you the more information around it. Now, the major point, as always, is this is just, if there was nothing to suggest a connection, then going, I wonder if Israel did that, is what I criticize in the mainstream alternative media. This is simply connections to Israel, or rather a group that's like a known suspect. It's like the usual suspects of people that are committing cyber crimes, and they happen to be involved, and they happen to be obsessing with genetic information. So to me, that feels like there's something to be considered there. What was this one? Oh, that's right. DNA sequencing giant Illumina to establish center of excellence in Israel. This is 2022. All throughout the COVID-19 issue, which, remember, all the swabbing they didn't need to do, there was a massive grab of genetic information. Now, Illumina, the world's leading DNA sequencing company, worth an estimated $51 billion, has announced that it will be establishing. So again, here's a $10 million fine. Like, they don't care about that. An excellent center in Israel for the advancement and development of artificial intelligence to provide scalable and highly accurate, streamlined solutions that dramatically shorten interpretation time of analysis, of genomic analysis in particular. But AI, it's the same direction we're talking about. It all seems to be AI, medicine, drugs, telemedicine, AI-driven evaluation. That's where it's all going. Led by Einat Metzger in Israel. Their presence in Tel Aviv will focus on AI-driven interpretation technology. Oh, and then this is just a tweet they put out in June 14th, 2022. Did you know that by 2024, genomic data is expected to reach 20 exabytes, which is just crazy? Clinical researchers in Israel have been working with Medgene now an Illumina company, so they're like absorbing other companies, which is kind of how this tends to work, right? Where you can have this sort of like hypothetically speaking, let's say this is a company that's been like infiltrated by a foreign power or by Israel or by anybody. But the point is about what Israel's efforts tend to do. Well, then they sort of absorb this company. Now they're 2 steps removed. You see how that works? And this is, again, public information about what they do. Whether that's happening here, that's for you to decide. To develop AI-driven interpretation tech and shorten diagnostic odysseys for patients. So it's really just showing you that the AI-driven direction was always where this was going, which we kind of knew at the time. AI drives data insights for doctors and their patients. This is open secrets in regard to, I just thought this was an interesting overlap. So Illumina Inc. does a hell of a lot of lobbying. So you could look at that as just the biotech direction, but if you can think of it in a way that is more, what I'm trying to paint is, because today the end point is going to be largely about Israeli infiltration of this country. Sort of kind of the overlap to start in the way is that if you see them utilizing these kind of opaque networks, it's worth considering whether this massive lobbying from this company, which they would do, by the way, likely anyway, as a $51 billion massive biotech company, but the overlap there, it's worth considering that. But the point is simply saying that in 2022, $9.3, almost $9.4 million in lobbying politicians, peak of it in 2022. And then in 2025, this year, already $2 million, 63 lobbyists. I just think it seems like a lot going on there. So more to consider and what might be happening. Oh, let's see one. And then this was the list of donors or of people they're lobbying on to. Again, basically the people they're bribing is the way I look at it. Well, guess what? Kamala Harris, Mike Johnson, DNC, RNC. Perfect. Red and blue. Your government, how that tends to work. Now, on an overlapping point, this is from the 25th of July. Microsoft admits it cannot guarantee data sovereignty. Now, I think we already actually showed you this in a previous show. My point is to overlap this first on a broad point. That this is just always the case. Whether they claim these, I don't think they're even truly interested in keeping your data safe, or if it ever really has been. It gets to some point we look back and go, oh, looks like they were all doing that. Looks like they were all using it. Whether it's the police department using facial recognition to spy on their girlfriends, or or it's this and your personal data from 23andMe or anywhere else being sold to the highest bidder, or France and COVID data. It happens every time. So that's the first point. It's just don't think any of this stuff is ever safe when you're handing it off to a third party. But on top of that, same overlap, Microsoft is, of all companies, incredibly, like, it is immersed with Israel from the top down, from where it's located, from that's important to think about. So overlapping in the same conversation, the access to data, I think, is monumentally important. Now, on a overlap to this that I think is important, State Department crimes, I'm not familiar, saw this today, says it's almost a year, and this is just a health overlap, almost a year since we published our article, Israeli Bioterrorism and UN's Complicity. Here's an update from Dr. Angela. It says, between June and July 2025, I can just read from her post, actually. Gaza recorded a sudden spike in Guillain-Barré syndrome. This rare autoimmune disease attacks the nervous system and can lead to paralysis and so on, saying Gaza typically sees 4 to 5 cases a year. There have been at least 95 in this summer alone. Now, do you remember what just happened? Doesn't have to be it could just be coincidence, correlation, but they sure as hell rushed in a ton of those polio shots. And that is one of the obvious, and look back through the history of those shots themselves. Now, I'm of the mind that there was more going on in the very beginning. Like we said, why would they be starving them to death, shooting them where they can, poisoning their food, poisoning their water, and then come out and try to, well, you could argue that that's the whole point, is they weren't designed to help them and that those things are dangerous. But in the mindset of, if that was the case, or you disagree with that, then why would they have done that? Because I think there's more going on in every case. I think it's experimentation, whether that's even what they gave them. I don't know. And that's not hypothetical, guys. Look in the past of what they've done. They've been caught left and right every other weekend for doing stuff like this to the Palestinians. But I think that point alone, I think, is just the real, it's interesting to me that this is where the correlation doesn't prove it, but it's striking, and it's all the time. And you look back, just take a look at the correlation of the rise in these kind of illnesses with the rise of the childhood schedule. And it's pretty hard to miss. Now, over that, Palantir Panopticon and Trump's new big tech-led private health tracking system. Basically, this was the show where I did the opening around that because it happened after the interview, but then played my interview with 7Cs where we talk about all this. But how interesting it is to have that come out. You're going to work with Amazon and Google and Microsoft and OpenAI to track your public health data. I mean, doesn't this all come back around to the same point? And doesn't now Israel have complete access to they have an AI partnership and the AI is accessing all of your data through this government? This is not hard to piece together right in front of you. And yet people still just don't want to accept it because I get it. It's crazy. But we're here. You can prove it. So it's interesting to think about how all that comes together as there's data leaks. And I think at this point, it's just we're starting to see the real picture. I kind of just didn't know where to fit this in, but it's important, I think, in the sense that, I mean, you already know this, to be honest, but the RFK Maha connection and the reality of, where it's all going and the concern, like what makes sense of what RFK is doing today for those that truly have followed his work and are now just baffled by what the hell is happening in front of you. This, I think, is interesting because one, it adds to what we already know. He's other clips of him calling Trump an idiot and JD Vance calling Trump a moron and Rubio calling him a clown. All of them, it seems, and vice versa, by the way. But this is another one that I hadn't seen. And this, apparently, even according to Grok, apparently this was Kathleen asked, apparently, and it was, at least according to them, and in my own research, the same, that this was in fact an RFK Jew. Because it almost, when I first heard it, it sounded like almost like something that people would make, even because of the words they use. But as it says here, and again, just looking for yourself, these statements were made March 2016 on his Ring of Fire radio show, praising a critique that likened Trump to Hitler and described his Trump supporters, as belligerent idiots, outright Nazis, cowards, bootlickers. And now he's working with them. I just think that's interesting.
One of the things that you write so beautifully, and your stuff is so fun to read, but you write about Trump. Quote, the way that you build a truly vicious nationalist movement is to wed a relatively small core of belligerent idiots to a much larger group of opportunists and spineless fellow travelers.
But that's a good point, though, isn't it? Because that is what happens left and right. And I believe that's what we're seeing, left and right.
Primary function is to turn a blind eye to things. Movement is to wed a relatively small core of belligerent idiots to a much larger group of opportunists and spineless fellow travelers whose primary function is to turn a blind eye to things. We may not have that many outright Nazis in America, but we have plenty of cowards and bootlickers, and once those fleshy dominoes start tumbling into the Trump camp, the game is up. When you talk about fleshy dominoes, Chris Christie comes to mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, for me, it's just because his voice definitely sounds different today. It's gotten better, right? But apparently that is real. But it shouldn't surprise you. I mean, they attack each other left and right. But just how do you make sense of that? What I tweeted about it was, and then he went on to join the team. Like, how do you make sense of that? Now, again, when I do that, I'm never it's more rhetorical. So people understand. I have my own opinions about it, but it's more just like ask that question, right? Why then did he join this team? What do you think about that? Because it obviously doesn't line up, but there's plenty of things to consider. There's, with that kind of thing, it's just that you could theorize in 75 different ways. Clearly, though, it doesn't make sense. And it's worth noting that, it's like, what could possibly happen where that kind of opinion just goes, oh, wait, never mind. Everything's different than what I thought before. All the people you see and what your opinions are. I mean, that doesn't make sense. So either he decided to try to make a change from within, which clearly isn't working, or that was never real in the first place, which I don't believe with, because I think his work helps. The past work still helps people. So there's a couple anomalies in there you could think for yourself, but I think it's very strange. Now, to bring this into the Epstein conversation, which obviously connects, right? I mean, not just because it's the government that's currently drowning in their own kind of psyops around the information around this, but the overlap to the Israel influence to it, to the end point, to Israel infiltration of this country and their blackmail network. I mean, it's all very relevant right now. So this is important to understand. So so far, we've seen the limited immunity that was gained before they had the conversation, which I think is already too far. I think that's insane. This person should not be given anything. She's already been found guilty of human trafficking. Think about how crazy that is. The people that are most primed, just conservatives, because of the Trump and QAnon and all of it to go, which rightly so care about human trafficking and pedophilia and in government, and then are I guess just kind of, see, it's hard to say because I think a lot of Trump supporters are very much calling this out. It's hard to see where that line is, but the ones that aren't are suddenly just like, oh yeah, give her a deal so we can find the next ones. She's a human trafficker. She's involved with that's what the evidence shows. Seems like a weird thing to do. But so she's got limited immunity from whatever she divulges in that conversation. So what if she admits everything about what she did. Now, and so now she's not going to get held accountable. Are you okay with that? Especially if you don't ever see anything else happen. They'll float a whole lot of claims and we might, coming down the line, we're going to be going after them, and then nothing happens. How often does that pass? But then we had the point where she's now saying she wants immunity, right? She wants immunity, pardon. Rather, I think she used the term immunity in before she testifies. And if she doesn't get that, then she's going to plead the fifth. That's the whole claim. Now, it seems as if the Supreme Court has already denied, or it suggested they deny, or rather, the government has suggested they deny in their document her appeal, but I don't think it's happened yet. So we'll go over some of this update. This is the ABC News report. Grand jury transcripts in Ghislaine Maxwell case contain nothing new. Now, there's two things to this. Well, technically, that's the next one. This one is about this one here. We'll come back to it. There's a recording from their recent interviews we're going to talk about too. So this is just about the claim, right? So Trump goes, we're going to unseal all the transcripts from, acting like that's going to solve it. So again, there's a part I missed in there, which you're all familiar with, that they just kind of blew up in their face, right? It went from a hoax to your weaklings, if you care about it, to, but Obama's the one, Clinton's in the thing that I just said was fake, but it's just, none of it adds up. And I think more than anybody, conservatives are calling this out. I mean, it's weird, but that's what I see. Maybe that's just what Twitter is today. But to call that fake is just wild to me after the whole rising effort of their side to make it it just seems like a weird deviation. But I think they didn't expect it to, people would just go along with whatever direction he pointed in. This weird little red thing blew up in the top. And so, okay, so the point ultimately comes down to the fact that she tried to make this deal with Trump, tried to get something to happen. And now ultimately, because it all didn't go the way, or rather before that, because it didn't go the way that the Trump supporters wanted, the Trump team wanted, and everybody kept asking for the list. They claimed it didn't exist. We see Trump, all this stuff's been going, he says, we're going to release the transcripts, which the point becomes, there's nothing new, which is what most of us were probably already saying. Now, I don't know for sure that there's something in there that we don't know about, but it doesn't make logical sense. Why would this have anything new, in my opinion? Or, that's my opinion, but why would everything new? It's stuff that we've already talked about. It's stuff that's already been discussed, which is ultimately what it says here. But this is what we were saying before. Much of what the Justice Department wants a federal judge to unseal from Maxwell's grand jury investigation is already known. And at least so far, the Attorney General is seeking to unseal nothing else. So on top of that, it's like they're only selectively doing so. Like, where this should be more than anybody, conservatives at the top of their lungs going, release the information. Nothing else matters at this point because you have made this your hill to die on. And if you keep trying to push us off the hill, we shouldn't believe in you. We shouldn't trust any of them. But if they're not unsealing everything, then clearly this is a selective game. The Justice Department turned over a version of the Maxwell grand jury transcript that identifies which information is not already publicly known. That anointed version shows that, quote, much of the information provided during the course of the grand jury testimony, with the exception of the identities of certain victims and witnesses, was made public available at trial or has otherwise been publicly reported through public statements of victims and witnesses. So it's an exercise in futility. And watch, they put that out, and the Johnsons of the world are going to act like it just changed everything, even though it's already out there. They did the same thing with the JFK files. Didn't really change anything. The Justice Department is asking two federal judges in New York to unseal the grand jury transcripts in the Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein cases. It is not asking the judges to unseal the grand jury exhibits, though the Attorney General asked for several more days to consider, quote, its position with respect to unsealing of the grand jury exhibits. So everything right now seems to be very selective and like almost with the intention of, if they just drip one more piece out, will that be enough to pacify you? That's what I can't stop feeling in all of this. Politico writes, and this is from today, Ghislaine Maxwell doesn't want grand jury materials in her case unsealed. Now, whether that's the truth or not, or that she's just playing into it's hard to tell. But it says Ghislaine Maxwell told a federal judge Tuesday that she opposes the Justice Department's effort to unseal grand jury transcripts in her case, which she described in court papers as a broad intrusion into grand jury secrecy. Maxwell said she opposes the unsealing largely because she is appealing her 2021 conviction on sex trafficking charges for aiding and participating in the sexual abuse of minors by her one-time boyfriend Jeffrey Epstein. Now, which I have right here, which we'll get to, in the U.S. government document in regard to Ghislaine Maxwell, where they request the denial. Where is I going? Oh yeah. So the claim that they're saying that basically what they're requesting is that because the Epstein sweetheart deal, they're claiming that somehow gave them all immunity. There was no, immunity from prosecution, and they went after her anyway. And in the U.S. government, what do you call it? Subpoena, what the document they presented, it denies that. It says that's not true, and here's why. But what's interesting to me, why is this only happening now? Right? So if she's been in jail this whole time, why does it, and that's been the case this entire time. Why didn't they immediately be rushing into the fact that, wait, we had a non-prosecution agreement? I mean, unless I'm missing something, that seems like a weird gap of time, and they only jump up to make this start happening when this starts going on, and when Donald Trump says it's all a hoax. So, I mean, I still feel, like I said before, that there's more to that story than anything, that there's an opening there to argue that you can't call this a hoax from the highest level of power and then still have me in jail based on that claim of what you claim is a hoax. Either way, that feels like a weird statement. Now, what they discuss behind the scenes with Blanche and everybody else, I think there's a whole other story going on. I think it's quite obvious, really, when you look at, they gave her a box full of materials. They claim she's saying on 100 different people, nothing's really happening. Maybe happen tomorrow. But I get the sense this will continue to drift in a direction of hoping we forget about this. And Maxwell made some kind of agreement that she'll eventually benefit from. That's what I sense in all this. But so the point was, again, that she doesn't want it unsealed because she's claiming that she's trying to appeal the conviction. Quote, given that she is actively litigating her case and does not know what is in the grand jury record, which seems odd, she has no choice but to respectfully oppose the government's motion to unseal it, said her lawyers. Okay, but so at what point, if let's just say, even though the argument is it's largely stuff we already know, if not all, she says, don't unseal it because I'm appealing, and that appeal never happens, and they oblige for some reason, like you can see a point in which we've got a lot of movement and nothing actually happens. You see how often that happens with the U.S. government in particular? The Justice Department requested the unsealing in both the Maxwell and Epstein cases as a way to fend off, as political rights, I agree, fend off from fierce criticism from Donald Trump's base after the administration decided against releasing the so-called Epstein files. Now remember, anybody honest in this is not necessarily, it could be, but not necessarily claiming it's like one list and one thing, but rather in regarding the list, just the access, the information that they have on who they worked with. Not hard to understand, but they try to give you some kind of a head fake and act like, well, there's no one list. Okay, fine. Then you make the list and give us the names. But it's clear they don't want to do that for obvious reasons, I would argue. But it says, as part of that effort to quell the backlash, a top Justice Department official also interviewed Maxwell, who is serving a 20-year prison sentence over the course of 2 days late last month. So, again, if nothing comes of that, we really need to ask ourselves what went down right there. And, okay, so she's saying about 100 people, and Jones made that like it was going to shatter the earth. What's going on? Now, again, I know it, especially with this, they need to investigate. It could take a long time. So how long do we wait? Do we give it a couple years until we find out? It's like, I think that's where this is going, personally. And it says, those steps, however, have been seen as largely futile. Whatever they're trying to do, everything listed off is not really being bought by his own base, despite him framing it otherwise, which I think even makes it more obvious. The grand jury transcripts represent only a tiny fraction of the investigative files. That's important to listen to. So they're really giving you a tiny fraction of what might be shown. And as the Justice Department said, contain mostly public information. The Justice Department has also said that Maxwell isn't a credible witness. Now, that very well could just be trying to undermine what she has to say about them and everybody. And who knows what actually gets tied back to this. This is interesting. This is Glenn Beck talking with, I kept my underwear on Dershowitz, which is just weird. What he does here is every time I see this guy, he gives me the increasing impression of more desperation, more like his arguments are not like, well, I guess the way to say it, not befitting of a lawyer. I don't mean that as a compliment. That what he's doing, he knows better in regard to, from a legal perspective, like what he argues there is, I'll let it speak for itself. Shannon Joy says, wow, Glenn Beck featuring Dershowitz, probably on the list, to launder Jeffrey Epstein's character in an attempt to rewrite history. Running cover for sex traffickers? Are you buying this? Here's what he said. Here's what Alan Dershowitz had to say.
Look, let me make 2 points that will be very controversial, and you may disagree with them completely. Jeffrey Epstein was not a pedophile. That term has a specific meaning. It means people who are sexually attracted to prepubescent girls or boys.
Now, I brought this up on, I think, AIM Wake Up the other day. It's not an invalid point. It doesn't mean he's not a monster. It doesn't mean he's not a sexual predator or even a pedophile that we can't, necessarily prove. The point, though, is that I did also find it strange that the entirety of like the corporate media started calling him a pedophile and sex, despite the fact that they were the ones calling us crazy for years, until it's like on a dime, they accepted the narrative, which in fact is, as he's pointing out, not even technically the accurate terms to be using for what they're doing. Doesn't that show you some kind of a weird game that now Dershowitz is trying to use to run cover for his client and everything else he works alongside and for and with and ideologically and everything? But my point, though, is that that's interesting because it shows some level of coordination, even like, which, yes, it's not that crazy, a coordination in dishonesty. But even though, again, the main point is I find it almost impossible to believe that that's not what was also going on and that there is actually evidence of exactly that going on around all of this. But whether that's exactly what he was facilitating, there's legal challenges to proving those things. But the reality is what this was and what it ties back to. I mean, it's not that far. I mean, frankly, that's why I don't balk at it. But the point of the people you can point to who they claim are victims are not. They're, 6, as he points out, 16, 17. So I find that very interesting, but I also find it very disgusting that Alan's trying to use that as a way to sort of claim that Maxwell was not a criminal, which is really where this is going. And on top of that, he goes on to make the point about not being a part of Mossad, which is really what stands out to me. It's just, also, there's many examples. Acosta's only one of them of claiming that he worked for foreign intelligence, and that other people above him said, back off. That's why. And so for Alan to push that just feels like all the more obvious. But I do think it's worth considering that point about the terminology used and why all of a sudden, as in lockstep, they all start. I think there's a reason to make it, there's a lot of ways you can consider it. But when that happens from a group that is almost always trying to manipulate you for whatever reason, whether they see it or not, it speaks volumes about what they may be trying to do. And maybe it's about trying to set some kind of a narrative around it that doesn't actually align with the facts that we have, even if it's the reality in the background. Worth considering, isn't it? But, Alan Dershowitz just creeps me out.
Prepubescent girls or boys, that is 11, 12 years old. That's the definition of all psychiatrists and of the law. Epstein was interested in 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds.
Okay, so you knew that? Okay, so are you pretending that you just discovered this through the files that have come out? Like, this guy worked for him, you understand? And so it's like the idea is that you're now just kind of casually letting it out that you knew he was a sexual pervert, you knew he was a rapist and statutory or otherwise. I mean, that's very weird to me that this guy continues to be put in front of people as some kind of a credible witness around somebody he clearly defended. And whether frankly, in my opinion, I don't care whether it's your job as a lawyer. If I was a lawyer, I would not defend people like Epstein, period. Now, you may think I'm naive, or you may think that's just not, that's a line for me. It's just like the line that I don't care how much it benefited me, I wouldn't support Israel in the genocide, right? So I think so my point in saying that is that I don't think claiming you're a lawyer is a good enough excuse to justify working for a monster like that. But my point on top of it is that I think he, has been very clearly aware of this to the point where, he went to the island, for crying out loud, says he just he had his underwear on when he got a massage. That was actually his argument. That's why I call him that when I talk about him.
He was a bad person, did terrible, terrible things. The word pedophile is not a correct description.
Very brave of you, Alan, to call him doing bad things. Very brave. All the people coming out like now they're the ones breaking the story. This guy was defending him well into the reality that everyone was seeing what he was.
Of what he was. Number two, he was not a trafficker. Traffickers make money by selling and enslaving girls. What he did is he was a selfish guy who was having sex with all these, sexual contact, at least, with all these 16, 17-year-olds, and maybe lending them to people like Prince Andrew. We don't know.
Oh, my God. So even just taking his statement at face value. So lending a girl to a prince is not considered trafficking when you're going to try to scream that a guy taking his children on a work job across state lines is human trafficking, Bondi and Nome. It's just insane. Well, the reality is, even if you want to claim that he wasn't selling these things, this is my point of a lawyer. Like that's actually a legal argument if you want to break it down, because the reality would be that, so what if he's working for somebody who is the one doing the selling? Like a network that he worked for a foreign intelligence apparatus, right? The idea to claim that he wasn't trafficking because he just wasn't doing that, or even more so that you can't prove that he was selling them. Isn't that what, I mean, Maxwell is in prison. I mean, it's just, this is a very disingenuous argument for 1,000 reasons. The point is that Alan Dershowitz and Glenn Beck are putting on their little dance here to basically gaslight you around Maxwell in particular. And I think that's where this is going. I'll play the Newsmax clip it again in a second. They're trying to paint you a picture of her being a victim right now. I get the sense where that's all, where all this is going.
No, for sure. But he was not a trafficker in the true sense of the word. That's why there's no client list. There were no clients. And the other
there was no money being exchanged.
No, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Great pushback, Beck. Great investigatory question, right? I mean, come on, guys. I mean, look, just his opinion, he's floating this. You have no idea how to back it. The point would be, though, if you're going to talk about trafficking and claim that's the only reason it's not trafficking, I could think of 17 questions that would be valid to ask on top of that, like the one I just put forward. Like, what about the people he's working alongside? What if they were, the bottom line is that what he's doing is human trafficking. And the idea from a legal perspective that there needs to be some kind of exchange, well, how do we know what they're exchanging? It doesn't have to be money, you understand? And clearly we can see that there was information exchange. There was influence exchange in the sense of power, and given access. All of this stuff is very obvious. You don't think Alan knows that? See, so on top of making the legal argument, I should just say, as a lawyer, he's making a legal argument to defend something he knows is a detestable crime. I don't know how you see beyond that. But let's be honest. I think we all recognize what this person is. I think his character speaks for itself, the lack thereof.
And the other, he didn't work for the Mossad. I know that because I debriefed him when I was trying to make a deal for him back in 2006, 7. And he would have told me if he had a deal, if he was working for the government, because it would have helped him get a clear, better deal.
Of course, because Alan wouldn't lie, right? That's not possible that he wouldn't lie, or rather maybe even rationalize from some lawyer obligation to not divulge that. But the bottom line is he didn't tell you that. That's how you know that. You see my point? These people aren't that stupid. You know, as anybody else knows, that your statement should be, especially as a lawyer, that what would be the right way to frame that? That I have no indication that was the case. Not that you know that, because clearly him not telling you that does not then prove it didn't happen. But you guys all know this. This is just, again, this is Beck and the rest of them just doing, that's my opinion anyway. Alan Dershowitz in particular, continuing to try to gaslight you around what's going on, because I think there's an interest in keeping this, I guess, stuck in the mud where it currently is. David Icke, Bloomberg reports the FBI redacted President Trump's name, which we already know, but this is a little bit of an addition to the story, as well as the names of other prominent public figures from the Epstein files under privacy exemptions. Bloomberg, David Icke says, I have lived a long time, but this has to be one of the most blatant cover-ups played out in public that I have ever seen. I agree. I mean, I honestly don't know of anything I've ever seen like this, that it's just like, it's like, like you say, it's a cover up in front of you. It's like he's shaking a blanket over the top of it. He's like, look over there. It's like, this is not what it looks like. Go look over there. Look at the Democrats. It's like, it feels really, really silly. Now, media reports Trump's name redacted from Epstein files. Bloomberg reported on Friday that President Donald Trump, in case you're wondering, by the way, it very well could have gone right to the Bloomberg report, but what I tend to do is report from whatever pops up that I see first, whether that's through the news app, which will give me all of them, or somebody shares it with me. I think it's important to, whether it's an outlet that is more viable or more respected than others, I try to do my best to point to the thing I see it first on. And then if I don't like it, I'll say that when I point to it, or people that share it on Twitter. Some person with 15 followers, that I see it from, you're damn right they deserve credit for that, but so many in the mainstream alternative media, the majority, in my opinion, will just siphon for this, grab from them, never point to it, and just can step on them and use them. So that's the point. It's why I'm not that familiar. Excuse me. Newsbreak seems to point to them, and I just wanted to point out that's why I'm not familiar with the platform, but there's a lot of them like that one. And I think Raw Story seems to pop up in theirs too, but it's kind of a multifaceted. That's why I like the app, is it kind of like just dumps things in front of you and you can decide for yourself. Anyway, I've never mentioned that. So back to the point. Bloomberg reported on Friday that President Trump was among those whose names were redacted from Epstein documents, which we already know, citing multiple people familiar with the matter. Now, what's interesting is that on that point, I think, what was it, 25th, I think, right? Right after that, when it became clear that the report, looking back, by the way, because we're looking back, we can see that was the day he was informed by Bondi that your name's popping up all over these things. which objectively, that doesn't prove he's committing a crime. We're not talking about some kind of a list of clients. We're talking about just the files and, whether he knew him, which we know he did. He's got 17 pictures with him, or however many there's a lot of them. It's clear he knew him, and it's very clear that he was friends with him despite the narrative. It's clear that he hung out with him. Jeffrey Epstein called him one of his closest friends for 10 years. It's very clear. But that doesn't prove that he committed a crime, at least not at the moment. So the point, where was I going with that? Oh, is it so she came to him and said, hey, your name is all over the list. So I think whether it's because he did commit crimes or whether he just recognized that wouldn't look good, he decided to be dishonest about it. He decided to hide it, which doesn't speak well for whether he broke the law. And so my point is, from that point forward is when we started to see it's a hoax. Obama and the Clintons, the Democrats did it all, which says a lot. Doesn't mean it's false, but it sure flavors the conversation. Now it says FBI Freedom of Information Act team conducted a final review. The team was reportedly tasked with redacting the name of Trump, a former friend of Epstein, and other prominent figures. Now, who are they? Why are we redacting people's names if this isn't some kind of a victim discussion? Like, that's the real point here. We already knew the name came up, but not that it was being redacted, right? That Trump's name was there. Now we're finding out that they've redacted people's names, probably him and his friends and people. That's pretty obvious to me. Now, if he comes out and addresses this, they damn well better be able to show you what they've done. But I doubt that'll happen. So because of their own interest, they've removed their names from this. How does that not speak exactly? That shows dishonesty, period. That shows you they're hiding something, even if it's just that their names are on the list or, the files. The final review occurred before the release of the Department of Justice FBI memo determining Epstein committed suicide, according to Bongino and Cash, because they saw the file and they know, even though every single data point points to the opposite, including the autopsy report. But they know, they saw. And that further disclosure of the files was not warranted, setting off a MAGA firestorm, rightly so. As Leopold noted in the report, Trump was a private citizen during the investigation into Epstein and therefore is entitled to privacy on the matter. Whoa, that is not even remotely the same thing as you having a private. You're not obligated to tell us what happened and what you know and what you've been a part of. But if your name is in a file, that's not the same. So you're telling me that you, by that same logic, you should black out literally everybody's name who is not in the government? How in the world does that make sense? That means your privacy is more important than whether or not you're committing crimes? I think this is very interesting. Now, to be clear, your privacy is damn near paramount. But the point is, we're talking about an investigation into crimes and not whether Joe at the corner used to look at this and know what's going on, but whether the government gets to investigate and go after those names if they've committed crimes, not whether the government blacks it out and hides it from every view. I'm not necessarily saying that everybody in the world has a right to see every single thing. I mean, technically, see, this is the hard line. What I'm talking about is the information around this should be made public entirely. But there is a fair point to be made about personal information around victims. Now, I frankly think that's being very abused. I think that's being manipulated for the interest of them keeping a lot of the secret, but I'm not going to claim that point's not valid, because it really is, especially with what so many of them have gone through for so long, both from the government and, everything else. But I think it's, that's worth considering. But it's as much as what has been written about Trump's former friendship with Epstein, though his name appearing in the files does not necessarily point to him being guilty, which I do think is important. Now, this is the recording of the meetings with Blanche. Bombshell recording of Ghislaine Maxwell interview could be released. And this is how Raw Story frames it after Trump edits it. Oh, this is the same one. It's right here. So what's interesting is which I agree, actually. I think that's more of the because here's the way the Independent framed it. Trump team weighs releasing Ghislaine Maxwell's interview with DOJ officials over Epstein case. Now it says the Trump administration is considering publicly releasing an audio recording of an interview with Ghislaine Maxwell and senior officials from the Department of Justice about Epstein, according to a new report. Now, why would that not be released? If you had same point, victims and so on. Okay. So then what's the debate here? And on top of that, the end of the day, if they release this with edits, no one's going to buy it. Now, that doesn't mean there's necessarily proof of a crime or that they hid something that isn't just victims, but it shows you the inherent distrust right now from even their side. Now, it says CNN also reported, per its sources, that some within the administration were concerned that making details from the interview public would bring the Epstein controversy back into the public spotlight, when many officials close to the president believe the story's largely died down. Or that's what they really want you to think, and it's not true. In a statement, Stephen Chung, White House communications director, said, quote, this is nothing more than CNN trying desperately to create news out of old news. He already addressed this issue in an interview with Newsmax, a real news outlet that routinely gets better ratings than CNN. Typical game they play. Like, that has nothing to do with the point. You're just trying to distract by, look, I don't disagree. CNN's a trash platform. So is Newsmax. What's funny is that you're trying to distract by throwing that in. You know, that's what I always say, right? When you're on the hot feet, bad Democrats, pedophiles, you know, and get people looking in the direction, even if those things are true. The point, it's just very common. What I think is interesting. So the main point is that, you know, so that now they have the effort to manipulate, or the ability to manipulate this. And so if you already see them redacting personal names that aren't necessarily there for anything other than, you know, his name and his friend, whoever they're redacting, there's not a legal reason to do so, or a victim reason. Why wouldn't they do the same everywhere? I think that's quite obvious, left or right. I think they're all compromised in all this. But what's interesting is that he's saying that's all CNN fake news, when all they're saying is the obvious, which they've already basically said that we don't want this to come back into the spotlight. So now he's calling it fake news to point out the obvious and references Newsmax. Well, I think that's important to highlight that Newsmax was the platform that just literally like a week and a half ago, at least one of the people on Newsmax tried to convince you that Ghislaine Maxwell was a victim. So interesting, right? So now you got Trump gravitating towards Newsmax to say, we already addressed it over there. On the platform, they're trying to convince you that she is a victim. I think that's very interesting. Don't forget this.
The Deputy Attorney General, the #2 ranking official in the Justice Department, and he's about to meet with Jeffrey Epstein's ex-girlfriend in prison, Ghislaine Maxwell, to find out what she knows. Let's find out. What is this all about? And she's also been subpoenaed by the Oversight Committee. I think this is great. I do have a feeling that she just might be a victim. She just might be. There was a rush to judgment. There was a lot of chaos there for a while.
See, is that what a journalist is supposed to do? You know what I mean? Like and this is not some long form conversation. Like, cause there's room for having a long form. This is a report about what's going on. And he's literally, she may be a victim. Okay. Based on what fact? Please continue. Oh, nothing but your gut feeling. That's just not how that's supposed to work.
All right. Granted, she hung out with Jeffrey Epstein, and I know that's apparently not good.
Apparently? This is just weird. I thought this was insane when this first came out. I'm like, how is this guy? I wonder if he even has a job anymore. We'll see.
She's in jail for how long now? 20 years. A 20-year sentence. Well, Alan Dershowitz is one of the greatest attorneys who ever lived.
Hey, there he is again.
And he has this to say about the Ghislaine Maxwell situation, speaking with Newsmax veteran Eric Bolling.
Should Ghislaine Maxwell be behind bars?
She shouldn't be, but she is. She is really serving Jeffrey Epstein's sentence after he committed suicide. There was no one else to prosecute because there was no real information against anybody else. And so they went after her and they sentenced her to a sentence that would have been appropriate for Epstein. But
so nobody else, no evidence about anybody else. How exactly is that even possible if you're accusing them of trafficking? On top of that, the reality is every single moving part of the Trump administration, even himself, in plenty of ways that were insinuated, not very, very obvious, but insinuated. But Cash and Dan, they have been screaming about the Epstein files, the Democrats, they're all pedophiles for the longest time, until they're clearly now changing their tune. So are you now saying, Dershowitz, that every single person that you support on the right has all been lying to us about what they know and where this goes and who's all involved? Then, okay, if that's the case, then why is Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and Barr and everybody else being brought in for testimony? This is all just so transparently dishonest. This guy is doing work for covering this up. The point is that they're trying to convince you that she is a victim. Now, this was just interesting. This was on one of these threads. Look at this picture of Maxwell and Trump. It clearly seems to be trying to hide who she is, at least with a wig at a time when she wasn't as well known. And Trump does not look that young in that picture. I think that's very relevant. This is not some old thing. And look how long this has been going on. And it's, again, if you're of the mind, this is a thread by Decentralized News. If you're of the mind that this is only about one side, you're not paying attention. They're both, your U.S. government, left and right, is working for people like this. I mean, that's my opinion. But I guess the way to put it, so it's not, it's just that it's one government. If you're looking at this as who's involved, or you hear us talking about one side, I'm not making it about Trump or Biden. I'm making it about the government, and all of them are representing that. And I think this is important to think about as they just, listen to Newsmax and they're trying to tell you she's a victim. Now, this is Daily Beast. Trump admin broke rules to move Ghislaine to Club Fed camp, which we reported on recently. And it's just wild to me. This is not only did they violate a rule to do it, it's where are all the people? Imagine if Biden had done this for the exact same reason. That point is always valid to reach certain people. Because you know as well as I, if you're listening right now and you hadn't considered that and you went, oh yeah, if Biden had done that, we would have been calling him a pedophile. We would have been calling him a sex trafficker. More so. And now, or you're working with him, you're trying to get him off, get him off the hook. So this is Daily Beast from the 3rd. Convicted child sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell secured a secret prison transfer after the Bureau of Prisons waived a rule designated to punish sex offenders. Now, also, it was supposed to be marshals. As opposed to, marshals were supposed to be bringing somebody like this. Instead, they went around them, or rather under them, I guess, and used the Bureau of Prisons personnel, which was weird. I think it's because there's a lot more going on with all this. And I think there's something else in regard to the way the Trump administration is working through all this. But it says she wasn't transferred to a lower security federal prison. She was transferred to a lower security federal prison camp closer to her family in Bryan, Texas, last week after she reportedly spent 2 days speaking with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche about her connections to Epstein. And it says the move required the Bureau to waive its policy that convicted sex offenders must be held at least at low-level prisons, which this is below that. Why does that make sense to anybody? Why would this possibly line up? Even if she wants to testify, are we not going to hold her accountable for her crimes of sex trafficking with minors? It's beyond the pale for me right now. You're literally allowing her to be, in my opinion, like I said before, that's part of the agreement they've already made, in my opinion. And I say that repeatedly because I just can't be sure this is, we don't know. But the deal, the 2 meetings, the box they gave her, what she said, the move to a different prison, the weird kind of moving of this through the government that seems to be leading towards no real outcome. I think that's what this suggests, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, since Maxwell received a waiver to facilitate the move, so giving them a benefit, right? Giving her a waiver for that human traffickers don't usually get to go to a prison they're not supposed to go to. Of course, reported by, Ken Delanian, Mr. CIA false reporter, which gave her access to less restrictive prison environment than the one that she was in Tallahassee. A federal prison camp is a minimum security facility with dorm-like housing, meeting with the Bureau of Prisons' lowest security level designation. Low-level security prisons are a step up from prison camps that she's in. A prison consultant told Delaney that he had, quote, never seen this done before for a sex offender. All right, so imagine that was being stated about something that Biden did. The move also came after she was reportedly threatened by other inmates for being a snitch, according to the Daily Mail. The publicity around, now that very well could be a manufactured story to rationalize the move, that's possible. The publicity around her conversations with the Department of Justice reportedly put a target on her back, which I wouldn't surprise me, just considering that it could have just been something that the narrative used to move her away because she's in danger. There's plenty of other places you could have gone. As soon as Ghislaine, or just in solitary, as soon as Ghislaine spoke to the government, she was considered a snitch by other inmates at Tallahassee. There were very real and very credible threats in her life. Doesn't that start to feel like exactly the way they set the Epstein story up? They moved him because he was getting threatened and the guy tried to strangle him. Okay, just making note of the overlaps. The prison also houses disgraced Theranos, right? The founder, Elizabeth Holmes, for that whole weird fake bio company, I think, and the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City star Jen Shaw. The families of Epstein victims condemned the move, saying it smacks of a cover-up. The families of the victims. They've lost the control of this completely. Now, I just thought it was weird that Elizabeth Holmes, she's in the same spot, and get ready for some kind of weird overlap of watch them just come out with some new bio company after they all get out. Turns out that was what it was always about. We'll find out, even though I don't think Elizabeth Holmes is real. It's joking kind of, but funny overlap. Maxwell has also reportedly sought a pardon from Trump, who has not yet ruled it out. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. Now, Orwell gave you some images here. This is the prison fence between you and this human trafficker. There's your federal prison camp, Brian. That's what's keeping her inside. It's like a college campus is what it looks like to me. And Orwell points out, meanwhile, these are the fences holding Maxwell, who was charged with trafficking minors. She went from maximum security prison to being able to shout or shake hands outside the neighborhoods of Bryan, Texas. Now, why would the government allow that? She says, meanwhile, Comer claims that he is waiting for her appeals case to complete before allowing Maxwell to testify before Congress. However, that appeal was, they've submitted the documentation for that to be denied. And which is right here for you to read for yourself. This is from the U.S. government. This is from July 28th, 2025, included for you to check out. Now, what I find interesting is the Obama overlap to all this for many reasons. Obviously, just the idea of going like, look at the Russiagate, look over there. Let's not forget, guys, Trump has already come out and said Obama has immunity and pointed to his own case and said, I think he even said, paraphrasing, he better thank me because that sort of set this up for Obama. So the idea that you think this is going to go after, it just doesn't line up, but they could do whatever they want. We'll see what happens. But legally speaking and just precedent, I highly doubt this is going to go anywhere, but maybe it's going to be an underling. Somebody that they'll go after to make it seem like they're going after the Russiagate people. But this story just doesn't, they just seem to be desperately focusing on this. Trump Army, breaking, 20 CIA, FBI agents confirmed that Barack Obama and a former CIA director fabricated the Russian hoax, which was then locked away in a CIA vault for almost a decade to brainwash voters and discredit Trump election by manipulating intelligence. That Hans says, this was reported a week ago, right? How is that breaking new information? Now, maybe the additional aspect of some people that these people confirmed what, okay, that's not some bombshell. 104,000, 3 million views. It's just funny how desperate. This is a repeat of exactly what we already know. And by the way, the same thing a week ago. This DNA breakdown. I'm of the mind that most everybody everywhere was very aware of this already the way it went. Nobody's in jail. It's not like this report was new. Trump had this information the last time he was in power. So right now, they've got this information, and he called him, he said, treason. No one's being arrested. Now realize this is not the point at which, they have to do investigation. No, that's already happened. The information is there. So if you're claiming they're criminals, why are they still walking around? If you can't piece that together, you don't want to see it. This is not going anywhere unless it's a desperate move, in my opinion, to convince you. I don't even think then. I don't think this is actually going to happen. And what's funny is other comments. Breaking, we've known this since 2017. These are conservatives in some cases that are just like, yes, look, again, if you didn't hear my last coverage, I'm not claiming this is unimportant. They should be in jail. They are criminals, but so too are Trump and Biden and all the rest of them. But what's crazy to me is that I think it's not going to go anywhere. So my point is, I think this is just a head fake to get you thinking something's happening, even though we all know that rarely, if ever, actually happens like this. And so when they point it out, it's not that I'm saying it shouldn't matter, but that we all see that I think it's not going to amount to anything, and we should be focusing on what we actually can do something about. But look, good, put him in prison. But if it's just this narrative that keeps cycling and they keep going, breaking, this guy agrees, let's start recognizing that it's more of a constant manipulation. Alex Jones, breaking. In a first, the DOJ has sent criminal charges to a federal grand jury with the goal of indicting the Obama Russian hoax. Okay. That's statements being circulated. Look for yourself. You can investigate, look on the DOJ website, ask Grok, do whatever you want. The reality seems to me that this was a stated thing that has yet to materialize. Like, here's what it would look like. Or I guess this is a different post, but like it would look like the DOJ post we had up a second ago. Actually, that's not the right one. But it'll look like the one that we showed earlier with the Illumina, it'll have that DOJ. So that's the point, is that would be posted and it would say, this is it's not happening. Not that I can find. Now, if I'm missing something, please share it with me. What I find fascinating in all this is they're saying, oh my God, look, they're going after them for the Russia hoax, which, by the way, Trump already said he has immunity from, so I highly doubt it will happen. And the rest of them are tied into the same government structure. And he says, we want the deep state indicted. Right. So he means Democrats, because that's the stupid thing they do. We want them convicted, and we want their asses, Brendan Clapper, Comey, Jack Smith, Hillary Clinton. We want their treason ass in prison. Oh, you mean the Clintons that Trump said were good people that he chose not to go after? This guy, they're constantly manipulating their people, constantly lying to the people that support them for something else. Whatever that is, you can decide. But come on, guys. Really? After everything we've seen, just even the last 6 months, this is what we're stating? The reality to me is that this clearly is not even like at the moment, again, like I said, doesn't even appear to be actually happening. Stating this to keep you on the hook. But what is currently happening is putting out subpoenas for the same people he's pointing to, by the way. Bill Clinton, and list right here. Bill Clinton, James Comey, Lynch, Holder, Garland. Isn't it weird? So he's going, go after these people for the Russiagate hoax, but instead they're being subpoenaed for Jeffrey Epstein, which good. I think they're all criminals and probably all guilty. But what I find really weird is that this is going to be likely framed as that. See what I'm saying? Like, well, I guess we'll wait and see what happens tomorrow and the next day. But I get the sense that people are going to look to this like that's part of that. When really this seems to be, let's couch this on just, we'll call in some Democrats and go after the Democrats for things that likely we can't even prove. We'll make it about Epstein, which again, let's not be, if you think for 1 second that I don't think these people are guilty of crimes along with this, you're wrong. I've covered this for years. The point is that right now, with all the time they've had, if you think they're suddenly going to go after him, I mean, I don't think you're right. But I found that to be pretty strange. So now you're going to have, if it even actually happens, by the way, and if they even actually show up, and if they don't, if they even actually go after him for not, which I doubt all that will happen, think about what it would look like to have Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton march through Congress and ask questions by a bunch of rabid partisans. Like this today is just crazy. They're all cartoons about Jeffrey Epstein, all these. Imagine Marjorie Taylor Greene asking questions of Bill Clinton. That's going to be something to watch. But my point is that it will amount to nothing, in my opinion, because if you go into this in reality, every single one of them or a lot of them are also complicit in this. That's why the Democrats and everybody else didn't want the list and everything else to come out. They keep voting this down. All of them. Very weird to me. But we'll have to keep watching, right? Because this is going to continue. But here's the report. DOJ launching grand jury investigation into Russiagate. Attorney General Pam Bondi has ordered a grand jury. So here's what I laugh about. You get people like mainstream alternative media who constantly tell you the corporate media is lying and dishonest because they are, right? But then this report comes out through corporate media, and that's what you get. Breaking news, what they just said. You can look for yourself. I mean, the things they're actually citing are that's what they're looking to. See what I'm saying? Like, so for me, I wouldn't report, unless it's simply like, this is what's being stated, let's wait and see. The idea that we're claiming they're going to do that, to me right now, that's wildly up in the air. And all we have is them stating that Pam Bondi said that somewhere in the background. No documents have come out. Nothing has been posted. And it says, into the intelligence regarding President Trump and Russia in the run-up to 2016. She has directed Justice Department staff to begin legal proceedings and ordered a federal prosecutor to present evidence to a grand jury about the matter to secure a potential indictment, according to a source familiar with Bondi's efforts. It is unclear what the charges would be and who would be charged. So, statements. How many times have we heard them say things that never actually happen? So, as always, if we're objective, we'd wait and see. I'm not saying we know for sure it won't happen. History seems to suggest it won't. Or if it does, that it won't really amount to anything genuine. But CBS News said so. That's InfoWars reports it for sure. That's how that works. Now, 5 times August, clearly seeing through all the BS today. The White House says the most transparent president in history. Don't you also find those kind of posts? That to me, that's like cat turd going, everything's amazing. You're winning. High five. It's like, no one thinks that right now. You're ridiculous. So for them to come out and be like that at this moment in time, it just feels desperate. Most transparent president, and 5 times August says, just don't ask about Epstein, the COVID shots, or I could fill in another 17 things, right? It's just weird. Now, one last thing I included at the end here that I think is very weird and stands out. This is an actual post from the Times of Israel on their blog section from July 21st, 2025. July 21st, that's 4 days before the kind of spin out of the Epstein file point of Trump being told his name was on the list. Here's what it says. Trump and his administration criticized Netanyahu in Israel, which they didn't really. Like, let's be real. There's been floated kind of back and forth. Let's put it this way. In my opinion, it very well could have been an actual break, and maybe that's why this makes sense. But they are still supporting him. They're still funding the war. They're still funding the genocide. That's clear. So the rest of it's been narrative as far as I'm concerned. What am I always saying? Action, precedent, outcome. That's all that should matter right now because they're always lying to you. So based on that, they're still completely lockstep. They're simpatico. But what's interesting is if there is more to this, whether this is a pressure point for Trump and Israel, which is exactly what I do think is going on, that's why they're still together, because they do have this over them. That's the hypothetical point. That's rather what we should consider. And what this article's about is claiming that Donald Trump insulted Netanyahu or whatever, or just didn't do what he was told, and Israel used the Epstein files because they're on them. Think about how crazy that is. This is from the Times of Israel. It says, and now the Epstein files are haunting him, right? So he insulted Netanyahu and Israel, and now the Epstein files are a problem for him. That's the first two sentences. For now, it says, for a long time, the files had subsided in the background. They weren't considered to be much of a threat to Trump. But all of a sudden, right after he started up with Israel, the files surfaced, and they seem to be overwhelming him. See this is a very interesting way to frame this. Trump blasted, and not necessarily even that hard to wrap your mind around or dishonest or inaccurate, but this is Times of Israel writing this, rather specifically Yosef Janowski for Times of Israel. And it says, Trump blasted Bibi after shrapnel hit a church in Gaza. Far more than that, by the way, after they destroyed these things and, bombed every church and every hospital. But it says the church, and the point was because it got a lot of attention because the Pope called the pastor there all the time. That's the only reason they were forced to make a big deal about it, because people cared, because the Pope talked about it. Just shows you how gross this all is. But he says the church is in a war zone because they make it that way. It was not targeted. Yes, it was. Either shrapnel from a nearby explosion hit it, but that's not true. But even if it did, it's the same stupid point that you're bombing civilian locations. But it says still, Trump berated Bibi. Not really. He called it out a little bit, barely, and demanded he just publicly expressed regret. How dare he? But it says after Israel bombed places in Syria in order to protect the Druze, again, insane levels of propaganda. They're literally killing the Druze. They're ethnically cleansing them or bombing them with their own bombs to blame it on, at the time, I think it was Lebanon. It's what they constantly do. But he says from the White House referred to Bibi as a madman, because he is. It seems that Trump's ambitions, maybe to sign business and oil deals with Syria. Yeah, we're talking about the terrorists that they're all supporting, including Israel right now in Syria, or maybe to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Not actually a joke, by the way, for them. And more important to him than preventing the slaughter of Druze, more important to him than stopping Israeli Druze from crossing into Syria, something that would greatly escalate fighting and bloodshed. Huckabee also chimed in, blasting Israel for withholding visas from evangelical groups. It's all feigned resistance, guys. Huckabee just came out screaming about how no one's dying and no one's starving in Gaza. These people are not on your side. But it says it seems that Israel wants to first ensure that the groups don't plan to missionize. But Huckabee seems insensitive to Israel's concerns. Yeah, because that's what they really think. Not just ethnic cleansing and hatred, just fair, right? Trump decided to bomb Iran's nuclear sites, and that's commendable. I'm trying to cut to the point here. And now some oil files are threatening him, blah, blah, blah. Perhaps Trump will realize that it really doesn't pay to start up with Israel. Do you get this? Is not even veiled, guys. Barely veiled. They're saying, if you call out Israel, even for things that we know are wrong, they're going to use the Epstein files against you. It says, perhaps those implicated in the files will express contrition and regret. It's like we don't all know exactly. Like, here's the crazy thing. The way he's writing this, you're supposed to get what he's doing. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. He's basically like, you can feel the smirk as he says, well, maybe, who knows? Maybe the people in the files will turn up and, maybe you'll get called out for crimes. They're making it very clear, at least the insinuation that they think Israel has stuff on Trump. And it says, because by divine providence, things that were hidden become revealed, it enables people to correct their mistakes and to endeavor to live their lives properly the way God wants them to. That's almost like threatening Trump. You better do this or we're going to call out your crimes. It says, and everyone sees that the world is not a jungle and that God Almighty runs the world. It's weird that why would they not type that? It seems weird. With compassion, giving, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It goes on to say the peaceful world. I mean, that's the gist of it. The bottom line is repeatedly stating he called out Israel and now the Epstein files are a problem, and goes on to continually reiterate the fact that that's because he called out Israel. And the timing of it, it's not even tactful. It's very clumsy. You are threatening to do this, or at least that's how he reads it, that Israel's doing that. Is that not insane? This is what we're always talking about, that your own government will tell you this is what they're doing in Israel, and then Israel will stand up and challenge that. Tell their people that we're killing them because we love whatever it is. And they just keep lying to you. You can literally show them, and they'll call you a Hamas supporter. How do we not see this? Now, we're going to end with this point about, not yet, pretty much right now. One quick point about this, then we're going to come back to, basically Mossad infiltration of this government. But my God, has it ever been this clear in history? Maybe, but I've never seen it. So before we get to this, that general point, that's going to be the last few segments. quick overlap to it relates, and you'll see why this relates back to Epstein, and then the larger point continues to relate to infiltration. This is Catherine Austin Fitts, the sense receptor, playing her thoughts in an interview about Epstein and Trump and why he was brought into power in the first place. You'll find this very insightful, and I think most of you probably agree with this.
I think they put Trump in to get the control grid. And we have at Celeria, we have a collection that we update every week of all the things the administration is doing to build the control grid. And I have to tell you, if I had chosen Trump to get the control grid and I was going to grade him on his performance to date, he gets an A+++.
Now, we do a kind of recurring, we've done about 3 of them so far. We're right now planning another one, like a recurring IMA panel about like the controls, it'll eventually stop, hopefully. But the point is that we'll continue to update the steps they've taken thus far in the interest of the control grid in the current administration. And every single time, it's just more and more and more. And we tend to go off her, Solari report where she keeps updating it. But I'm sure we'll do another one coming up soon. And it's just wild. I mean, all of it. We go over all of it, whether it's the mRNA health platform side of it, whether it's the Panopticon or Doge and the Starlink satellites or every single thing they're driving forward right now is in the interest of this, at least in part. That's not my opinion. You understand? That's very easy to see. Catherine's breaking this down every single day. And so she's simply saying that Trump was put there for that reason. Now, whether he knows that is something we should be considering. But I very much agree with her at a core value that is why he's there, both to pacify people who would otherwise be the most resistant, as well as just to roll it. I think that's the central point for me, because if he wasn't there and it was Obama or Biden or anybody else with a D, these people would be marching through the streets. Same thing with COVID. And they didn't because they thought he wouldn't be the guy to do it.
He's done a fabulous job. And I can't imagine another politician who could have done this much this fast. So, but if you look at what they've achieved, I don't think they need Trump anymore. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to get rid of him, but.
Interesting thought, right? She's not wrong. It's sort of like once they got like with Elon Musk and Doge, he jumped away. They're still rolling it. Everything's rolling forward. You could really remove Trump from this equation. And at this point, it would continue. Almost probably even help them at this point for the way it's starting to feel, but we'll have to wait and see.
If they want to get rid of him with Epstein, they can. It will work.
Yeah,
I just
I'm so surprised that, to me, it's quite obvious that Trump is on the list because they were besties. But if he's on the list, and he knows, of course, he would be on the list, why was he making Epstein so important during his campaign? Because, of course, that would backfire at some point. It doesn't seem logical for Trump to use Epstein as a trump card in the campaign.
So I don't know if he was using it a lot in the campaign. I think Kash Patel was using it a lot, and I think Dan Bongino was using it a lot.
Well, his team was using it, right? So, and also all his supporters were vocal about it, and he didn't. He could have stopped it back then already.
And Vance too, by the way. At least more than once, I've seen Vance bring it up before the selection process.
Now it's too late to get the genie back in the bottle.
So here's who pushed it, and I didn't realize this until recently, because I was very early on in saying QAnon was a hope porn and ridiculous, and not to pay any attention to it. But what I didn't understand was QAnon made a very big deal about Epstein and pedophilia and Trump secretly cleaning it all up. And, basically the Democrats were engaged in pedophilia and they were at the heart of Epstein, and Trump was going to secretly clean it all up. So QAnon apparently made a huge deal about Epstein. And that is seriously, in my opinion, and I say this because I know many people trapped in it, it's a cult. It's just a completely adult fairy tale. But they believed it. And so now that he's coming out and saying, oh, it was a hoax, Epstein is a hoax, it flies completely in the face of the cult. So now we've got a really big problem. And I don't know why he didn't put it back in the box. I don't know why.
Yeah, and it's too late now, I think, especially since Musk is saying he's on the list. To me, it all seems like a trick to, in the end, get rid of Trump and then continue with Vance, who's already...
Yeah, that's something a lot of people have considered, as Steve calls it, Peter Thiel's golf club. But we forgot, at least I forgot about it in the moment, that really weird moment where Elon Musk broke away and said he's on the list. What is that about? Like, how can you possibly fit that in to it being in any way in their benefit? So it's, that's how do we fit that in? How does that make sense? Was Elon actually upset with him? Was there some kind of split? It's really difficult to tell at this point. Like, this is why it's always important to consider that there's always multiple agendas. There's always moving parts. Even if it's like with COVID, that they all seem to be lockstep in one large agenda, there's always vying underling agendas everywhere, their own personal benefit for their own long-term agenda. That's important to think about. So that may be why that took place.
Already part of the Palantir and Peter Thiel gang anyway.
If the people who run the system want Trump out, they can use Epstein to do it. It will work. And they can get him out by the end of the year if they want. I totally agree with that. Like, imagine right now, let's just say she's right, and that the design was that they're done with Trump for some reason. Put some information out that comes out and right now they've already kind of slanted it that way. If suddenly something slips out that shows you that Trump was involved, I think half of his supporters would start to think that's the case because of the way he's dealt with this. I think at this point that would actually work, but that wouldn't be a positive thing because clearly that's what they want. And they're trying to get him out of the way to roll in the next thing. But, it's not that it's a good thing he's there in the first place. I think they're all criminals, but how about we just get rid of him entirely? No government, but no one's ready for that just yet. But going forward, in regard to the control grid, right? Douglas McGregor, he says, congratulations, MAGA is being taken for a ride to the surveillance state. Look at Palantir Tech, guys. Look at how incredible that is. That is, what is that? Jeez. That's like quadrupling their, especially when you go back to before 2024, they have exploded because they're everything. But you listen to Jones and the rest, it's a small little thing. The Democrats are making an ant out of a molehill, or what's that phrase? A mountain out of a molehill. It's like, that's not true. It's not some small thing that, it is one of the largest and most valuable companies in the world right now. And very clearly is not spying on the government. It is spying on you, according to everything you could possibly look to. So consider those that are trying to lie to you about that. Now, this is an interesting overlap. Barnes said, as soon as Elon Musk and Doge wanted to go to the Defense Department and the Federal Reserve, Elon was suddenly out and Doge suddenly cut off. Coincidence? Maybe. It may very well could be that Elon Musk is not the villain, and that's why. It's hard to see it that way with everything that's going on and everything they're involved with. Look, the reality is Elon Musk has worked with Biden and Trump, and he's a government contractor. He's part of the technocratic rollout. That's not hard to see. So this, whether he is genuinely wanting to fix problems in the government or not, I don't think it's in our interest to believe that Elon Musk is the hero in this situation. If not, on top of that this was all coordinated to get you to think that, which is worth considering. But I don't think it's coincidence or even that he was genuinely trying to go after those things. Was he really? At what point was he ever truly actually going to look into the Department of Defense? I don't even think he really floated that idea more than that never actually was even close to coming to pass. I don't think so. Neither was the Federal Reserve. These were things that they were talking about and that people wanted to believe, but really didn't materialize, in my opinion. But overall, it's worth considering. Maybe he was trying, and that's why they booted him out to the side. But my opinion, I said, because Elon was always the hero, guys. Yeah, that's coming. Here comes the America Party. Artificial intelligence will save the world. And Elon Musk sets himself up to be the one that was always trying, and the rest of them are the deep state. I figured it out. I was inside. I can see that genuinely coming to pass, and people would fall for it. Just like they wanted to believe in Trump, even though we were all there going, don't fall for it again. It'll happen again. People who got tricked by Trump will then go, okay, but Elon's the one. It's a cascade, guys. They just keep you tumbling down the rabbit, or rather, that's the wrong analogy, tumbling, up the, I don't know, not in a good thing. Let's put it that way. But so continuing, APAC tracker, this overlap to Elon Musk and Twitter. The Zionist asked, that's interesting. Is that gone? Oh, wow. They're all deleting these things now. This is, okay, no, it's still there. There's another one that looks like it was deleted too. But look at that. Funny how it's not showing up. It's one more example of Twitter, guys, hiding information. But it says, after our legal appeal to Elon Musk to enforce the new U.S. sanctions against Hamas terrorism, Francesca Albanese had her blue check removed, and they're boasting about it. They're saying it took one day. We reached out, or no, that was the other report. The point is they're simply saying we asked, they responded. Yesterday, today. So censorship, guys. A person who has zero, this is probably one of the most principled people I've seen in this conversation. Regardless of what you think about her opinions, she has stood her ground around what we can prove is true and has not faltered, has stood up for Palestine,
It's not out there breaking the law, not doing anything. And you're a Hamas supporter. It's the same thing they're calling Khalil, the same thing they're calling Ozturk, because they're desperate and dishonest. And so what's crazy is Elon Musk and Twitter followed suit. That shouldn't shock you at this point. It's not a free speech platform. They're not out for your support. They're not trying to help you. They're working at the behest of something else. They work with the ADL. They censor Americans for Israeli criticism. It's not secret. And so the APAC tracker, which I think is interesting, that doesn't show up. Let's see if it does if I refresh it. Isn't that weird, guys? This is everywhere you look. I've got a couple examples coming up next. Because that's the post. It's right there. All right, it was. I just closed it. Right there. The Zionists asked Elon to remove UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese's checkmark, and he complied. Now let's see if it's back. I didn't check since I've gotten live. Nope. It's gone. I mean, think of how petty and stupid that is. Are you arguing that she's not who she says she is? You see how punitive that is? That's not how that's supposed to work. You get it because they're claiming they've confirmed who you are. And now they just yanked it because Zionists say we don't like what she says. Do you realize how insane that is? How obvious that is? That's who Elon and this team, that's what they are, guys. That's why I think they're not even remotely on your side. And I said the free speech platform, as long as Israel agrees. George Galloway says reinstate her, Elon Musk. I doubt it's going to get any, people are going to do anything about it. See, I had that liked earlier. Now it wasn't there. That happens all the time too. By the way, on a quick side note, you ever go back and look at, I have things that I often every so many months I'll retweet to get it back in so you got like that thread of doctors, for example. Every time I go back to them to retweet and like them, it's not retweeted. It's not liked. That's not how it's supposed to work. It's not supposed to eventually just disappear. It's supposed to stay in your thread, in your feed. But how often I go back and things like that are just casually removed, not liked, not retweeted. I don't need to convince all of you. I think everyone knows. I think a lot of people are just okay with it because they don't like people that are being suppressed. Typical how that goes. But it says Zionists got their way. Elon Musk just suppressed a UN expert, Francesca Albanese, after a pro-Israel legal group got her blue check removed. I think how dumb that is. You're fighting to get her blue check removed like that even means anything to anybody anymore? Insane. Daniel McAdams. Anyone know what that means? He says, am I going back to the gulag? Look at what it shows him. Under review. So his account, actually, let's look real quick. See if it's gone away. Or if it even shows to us. No, see, it only shows on his side. So he logs in and that's what he sees. Under review. And it says, oh, actually, is it gone? No, it's still there right now. The blue check is. And he said, and it says, our team is doing a quick review of your account. You should see your check mark here within a few days. The under review label is only visible to you. Interesting. Now, maybe it already happened. That's why the check is there. I'm not sure how that works, but I just think that's weird, right? It just can, and Syrian girl says, oh my God, you're being gulagged again. We'll see. But you see, there's no reason. He didn't do anything wrong. I mean, you look for his work for yourself. He's a very educated, very intelligent, very well-spoken. It's not as out there, anything they would claim will get you censored. Well, I guess that unless you're criticizing Israel appropriately, well, that'll get you censored right away. But a couple of last points on this before we get into the infiltration and overlap with disaster funds for hurricanes, for example. Right before I went live today, actually, no, this is the one from today. I'll do this one first. So this is, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm mixing up. There's a reason I put them that way. I got to trust my lineup before I jump back in. I always do that and reorganize and realize why I did it in the first place. For those of you listening who even know what I'm talking about. So first one, this is from today. And I said, before I could even go live, this is on this post, which we'll see if I can see it still. Yep, there it is. Like literally within seconds of posting this, look at the engagement. Really? Does that lines up for people? That this is with 77,000 followers that we get 5 likes on. It's not even about likes. It's about you got 1,000 views. 1,000. That's just not. This is supposed to represent some kind of overlap to. If you've got so many followers, you're going to get this percentage on a general basis. Never. When this happens, it's shockingly suppressed. And every time it matters, they jump in and just do this and tag that. It's always half the time it's nonsense. And they block you, and then. This is the person they're trying, come investors, stocks and crypto. It's all completely contrived, guys. This is about suppressing you by blocking and downvoting, whatever it is, and it works every time. Or just whatever Twitter wants to do. And I just simply said, before I could even go live, they seek to suppress the show. Just another day on the free speech platform. If you care about free speech, support BitChute. This one, is one that I was posting earlier. We're going to talk about that to start. It's an article from the Free Thought Project that we posted from Rachel Blevins back in 2017. You know it. You know the story. It's breaking news right now, but in regard to other things, it's important to think about, though. Texas officials forcing Hurricane Harvey victims to pledge loyalty to Israel to receive funding. Seriously. We're going to go over it. Most people didn't even believe it back then. So we posted that. And look, wait, what? You can't be real. Invest in this person. Every single time. It's just nuts. Okay. Important article. Now, the gist of this, at Hurricane Harvey, or after, there were people that, well, two things, people that were trying to help, that were like arrested and shut down because they were trying to help people that the police weren't helping. Not in one day, but over a period of time where they couldn't get to them because of the water. And so people brought their boats and they were like, you're not allowed to. Like, it's disgusting what they do. And it happens every time, left or right. Every time. Here, people were being handed documents when they were trying to collect aid. And they said, well, you have to sign this. And people looked closely and it said, I will not boycott Israel. How disgustingly dishonest. Not telling them, first of all, but secondly, that this is American taxpayer aid. And you're telling us we can't criticize a foreign government, which one, is unconstitutional, and two, has nothing to do with American aid or Texas, other than Abbott's complete occupation by Israel, it seems. But you can read through this for yourself. Now, one thing I wanted to highlight in this is this, see this tweet from Cynthia McKinney, who I've interviewed, I think twice, way back in the day. It shows nothing, right? It says not found. That's weird, seeing as how that's the tweet right there. Look at that. Now, what's interesting about this, it doesn't give me the option to embed it. Now, I'm noticing right now that that is grayed out. Now, I wonder if that's because she did it. I mean, you tell me what you think. Is it normal for them not to be able to embed tweets? I mean, I did it here. I embedded it when I posted this article back in 2017. But I find it very interesting that either she's being suppressed or something. You can't embed this tweet anymore. And that's why it says not found. I'm just pointing out, I think there's a ton of these little suppressive tactics that add up to a very big deal on top of everything else. Her point was, it's true, folks. One has to pledge not to boycott Israel in order to get funding to rebuild your home. Of course, now the Texas page has been deleted because that's how that tends to work. Even the Wayback Machine, by the way. Every version of the Wayback version has been also deleted. Very few things seem to get that far, except in this conversation. But Keith Woods points out, a few days ago, Trump was threatening to tear up a trade deal with Canada if they recognized a Palestinian state. We talked about that. Wow, he says, Canada just announced that it's backing statehood for Palestine. That will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal. The next day, they didn't reach a deal. And I think he put like 35 something, he put on tariffs. That's why. Everybody, I mean, from Matt Walsh, Daily Wire, came out and said that is absurd. I mean, it's on its face absurd, guys. And look, I'm not saying I agree that this is, what he's doing in tariffs are for the interest of this country or in your benefit. The point is that's what he's framing it as and what a lot of them think. And so the point is you're saying, I'm not going to do this thing that's in your benefit as we're framing it for you because they support Palestine. How is that America first? That's what Matt Walsh and everybody was saying. You're doing this for Israel at the expense of Americans, at least as the framing goes. Adam says, Trump threatens to pull a trade deal with Canada if it backs Palestinian statehood. Now, the point is the trade deal, not the tariff necessarily. My point's about the tariff when I'm saying that. Either way, the reality is he didn't do the thing that he said was in your benefit because they support Palestine or they even feign to. It's undeniably obvious, guys. So Keith says that happened. Now his admin, and this was posted yesterday, is now promising to withhold disaster relief from states that boycott Israeli companies. So the reason I started with that first post is because it's not new. This has been going on a long time from left and right administrations. But, today that's how these things work. Everything's brand new. It's all breaking news every 30 seconds because they repackage old stories. That's a lot of the mainstream alternative media just trying to get grift along with everything. The point, though, is that it has been going on. This is not a brand new story, but what's happening today is a compounding version of it. The Trump is now adding this. Now, what's interesting, on top of what was already there, on top of the anti-Semitism bills, on top of the censorship, on top of everything else that's happening, the deportations, and then walked it back. They reversed their pledge to do so. And then, as far as I can tell, this is the current page. Just refreshed it right there. that still, or rather now, says it again. Now, I'm going to go through this and show you the thing that was outrageous and should still be under anti-discrimination and recipients of aid that you pay taxes for. One of the things they list DEI, right? Okay. One of them is discriminatory prohibited boycott means refusing to deal, cutting commercial relations, or otherwise limiting commercial relations specifically, which is even that. Why do you need to make it specific? Right there, that would apply to any country, right? Specifically with Israeli companies, or with companies doing business in or with Israel, or authorized by, licensed by, or organized under the laws of Israel to do business. Which, by the way, is pretty much your choice, regardless of the reasoning. I don't want to do business with that country, but not if it's Israel, it doesn't matter. You're not allowed to do that. Very weird. Now, what I'm trying to show you here is, unless I'm missing something, is this is the current live page. But we're going to go through this conversation to show you that over the process of yesterday to today, they've removed it and I think added it back. I don't know how else this could be there live right now. Let me show you what I mean, which I think screams even. It shows two things in my opinion. One, that they tried to do this without people seeing it. It got seen and it made them look really bad and people screamed about it on top of everything else. Then in an irrational move, just removed it and said, never mind, and then put it back in for some reason. Now, what would that tell you? I mean, whether they'll know you'll see it again and clearly benefits only one group. Now, he says occupied country in regard to what this shows you. I don't know how we can ignore the possibility of that today with what's going on. That's not some racial term. That's not some white nationalist term I was once accused of for saying occupied country by somebody I respected during COVID-19. I don't know why. It seems like they're all starting to see this now, right? They literally called me a white national, white supremacist for simply saying that Israeli government is occupying, or the term was we're occupied. I didn't say we're, but the same point that the Israeli government is influencing the policy of this country. Everyone, the point is people were terrified to go in that direction, even though it was easily proven. So even Kevin Sorbo, just in, by the way, Disclosed TV puts out a tweet that says that. Now, yes, they've got a link down here, but the link just is the same thing. It's there's a report page that says the same thing. Isn't it interesting that people anywhere would ever go, oh, like that thing says that thing, so that's what I know is happening? I just think I've seen things Disclosed TV has shared that I can later prove aren't even true. It's, not as, I'm not saying it's because they reported things that were widely going around that didn't turn out to be the case, right? I'm not trying to suggest that they're necessarily dishonest. I think largely Disclosed TV reports things that are what are happening. My point, though, is that it's everyone's responsibility to not just go what that text says on Twitter is what we know is happening. People lie. People get misled. Anyway, the point was Trump withholding disaster funding for states and cities who boycott Israel. So if you're paying attention, this has been an ongoing story since 2017 and well before. And he goes, wait, what? I'm just like, God, it's crazy. I said, finally starting to see it. It was always there on both sides. And even that got some reasonable reach underneath his in regard to Trump saying he supports Israel. Now, the question is, what are they going to do after this? Are they going to go right back to blindly supporting Trump and whatever team effort goes forward? Or are we going to start to recognize this is a problem? Even if he pulls it back, which it doesn't seem that it ended that way, doesn't that just show you that that you got caught and he hides it? Oh, well, never mind. That doesn't make it any better, you understand? Glenn Greenwald highlights what Sagar said, and he goes, the Trump administration's decision to withhold disaster relief, and this is yesterday before something had shifted, is even more insane than I thought, he writes. It extends a ban on disaster funds from our tax dollars to anyone who refuses to deal with Israeli companies. This is the issue. That's exactly what I just read to you. Glenn says, even worse about this Trump policy that bans disaster relief funds to any American state or city boycotting Israel is it only applies to Israel. It really is just that clear. You can boycott France, Peru, UAE, South Korea, or even other American states and get funds. You just can't boycott Israel. Speaks for itself. Matt Walsh, same thing, same tweet, says there is just no way to reasonably claim that this qualifies as America first. I appreciate that. It's exactly correct. It's simply not. You're literally acting against this country's interests, or rather, at the very least, putting them second, at least, and Torah Jews, which is, I forget which one it is. Yeah, they got 58,000 followers. There's a couple different ones toward Judaism, ones toward Jews. They're all part of like a similar kind of grouping of Orthodox Jewish communities that call out that Zionism does not represent Jews, at least in their opinion. And I think it's generally the growing, I think people are starting to recognize what Zionism is. And they say, unbelievable. The constant weaponization of anti-Semitism endangers American Jews time and time again. Now, Trump administration won't provide disaster relief to states. Now, we're going to get to the transition of this. This is still in the fourth. This is the report from antiwar.com, which you should support, by the way. I'm going to be interviewing Dave DeCamp coming up. I believe we have it on. I did the same thing last time. It's coming up this coming next week. Looking forward to that because that's a long overdue conversation, as well as Greg Reese, by the way. He's going to be coming on soon. The Trump administration has said that states and cities will not receive funding to prepare for natural disasters if they choose to boycott Israel, according to Reuters. And it says the document says that in order to receive funds from FEMA, which falls under DHS, states must certify that they will not engage in discriminatory prohibited boycott. Now it says a discriminatory prohibited boycott is defined in the document, as we just showed you, refusing to deal, cutting commercial relations, or otherwise limiting commercial relations specifically with Israeli companies. It's just very clear. That's their wording. Now it says on condition of FEMA funding, the condition on FEMA funding takes aim at the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Now, as always, throughout the time this has been happening, they trying to always frame them as terrorists. And they go, why can't you just go through the legal channels and go through activism and protest? And then they do that and they get called terrorists. BDS is a terrorist movement. It's like, the point is today, everyone's starting to see why that's been going on. The lie around it all. And the reality is boycott and divestment and sanctioning, rather just you being able to boycott and divest from other companies is your absolute right, constitutional and otherwise. And so all they're telling you is you're not allowed to do that when it comes to this one state or anyone associated with that state. And it says, which calls for a global boycott, that's the BDS movement, to pressure Israel over its occupation, illegal, of Palestine and its ongoing genocide in Gaza. After the news about the Israeli boycott condition for FEMA broke, it sparked a backlash online, which is continuing to show you that people aren't they're not blinded by the narratives these days. That got shown. Conservatives were pretty upset about it, rightly so. And it says, including from many Trump supporters. In response, the DHS removed the language about Israel from its terms for the funding. But its statement made clear that it would still enforce it anyway. So let's address that first. So, this is interesting first. Nicholas Fuentes comes out. We talked about him this morning on AM Wake Up. And Steve and I largely agree. I just think it's an odd way this developed. It's just suspicious, but either way, it seems like he is being he's being attacked by the rest of them, which is interesting. But it says the Trump administration is now withholding disaster fund relief from American states that boycott Israel. So remember to pledge allegiance to Israel before your house is destroyed by a fire or hurricane. It could save your life. It's perfect, right? Here's what Alex says. Good news. Under public pressure, they just reversed. It just speaks for itself. And Index Red says what I would probably say. Alex, exactly how does that work? Trump DHS, I hope you die if you don't support Israel. Oops, sorry, didn't mean that. It's just, they did this and then they walk it back because it's too unpopular. All that shows you is that they're bowing to what you guys want from them, which is, I guess, arguably a good thing in regard to how government should work. But it shows you that they want those things. It shows you that, and really, it's not about what you want. It's because they recognize the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. Now they still think that way and even act that way, which is what this next point is about. And this person saying, good news, they just pulled back on that. And Fira says, no, they removed it from the posted document. Again, I think they added it back, but made it clear that they still enforce it. Here's what they posted. Rather, Sagar says, okay, after speaking with folks, here's what's actually going on. An original guidance from DHS explicitly stated that federal disaster funding was barred from states that allowed the boycott of Israel. The White House changed this explicit language after widespread outcry, but the DHS tweet makes it clear that the admin reserves the right to deny those funds on BDS grounds should they want to. DHS will enforce all anti-discrimination laws and policies, including as it relates to BDS. So the fake Jones kind of argument about all the rest of them going, we did it, they listened to us. They did not. They simply removed the text and said, well, we're going to do it anyway, though, just like everything else they're doing, because they are acting against American interests for a foreign country. They're telling you right there, guys, and it's not about these terms. But even if it was just about anti-Semitism, that is still not a crime for you to express your thoughts and think a certain way, however disgusting we may think it is. The reality on top of it is always it's not even about that. They're about people who support Palestine or call out the crimes of Israel, which in their own definitions is now anti-Semitism. It's just insane where we are. And it says they might still do it. They're just not saying it out loud right now. But I don't even agree with that framing. They're telling you they're going to do it. We reserve that, which says we will enforce all of these laws as it relates to BDS. So they're saying we don't need that statement. We already have the fake anti-Semitism legislation, which, by the way, should be null and void, or is, based on Murray versus Madison, because it's repugnant to the Constitution, but nobody cares about that. They're all repugnant to the Constitution today. But here's the post. U.S. reserves reverses pledge to link disaster funds to Israel boycott stance. The Trump administration on Monday reversed course on requiring U.S. cities and states to rebuke boycotts of Israeli companies in order to receive disaster funds, according to a statement, and deleted the earlier policy from its website. The Department of Homeland Security removed its statement that said states must certify that they are not boycotting Israel to get funding. Reuters reported on Monday the language applied to at least $1.9 billion that states rely on to cover search and rescue equipment. So you realize how gross that is. You're literally holding over their head money they need to potentially, we know how states abuse the same thing, but potentially use those funds to save people. And you're going, you can't have it unless you promise not to go after Israel. You can't help Americans until, this is why this just keeps getting more ridiculous. And it says, search and rescue, emergency equipment, manager salaries, backup power systems, among other expenses, according to Reuters. This is a shift in the administration of Trump, which has previously tried to penalize institutions that don't align with its views on Israel. Very clear. Everyone sees it. Now, here's where it gets super interesting. This is the actual post from Homeland Security, which they get called out for by Twitter, which is hilarious, where they say misleading. You just basically removed it. But they're saying there's no FEMA requirement tied to Israel. Axios is saying that's what the reality is, because it is, even though they're, watch. It says hiccups all of a sudden. There's no FEMA requirement tied to Israel in any current NOFO. No states have lost funding and no new conditions have been imposed. FEMA grants remain governed by existing law and policy. DHS will enforce all anti-discrimination. And they go on to say exactly that. But they're saying there's nothing new. Well, guess what? Even they called him out and said that's misleading, seeing as how they only just now removed the section stating exactly. You realize how these people are inherently dishonest, not left and right, just the government, guys. But I'll be honest, it's far more ridiculous. And I just mean not just the dishonesty, but their inability to do so in a convincing way is way worse right now. Noam and Bondi and Higgs, these people are clumsy as hell, and they're really bad at lying to you, which is a good thing in a way. In a really obvious way. But my point is that they're coming out like this and just going, that's not true, even though everyone can tell that they just, we're not going to be able to piece that together. To me, that's where I always go, that's desperate. Or they're just really that incompetent, but I don't necessarily think that in every case. But so here's Mel. And this is where I think it's important to highlight these overlaps. She goes, why are you lying? You literally updated your guidelines 20 minutes ago. And she posted this before the reader context was added. Check this out. She just ratioed, at least on likes, the Homeland Security account, DHS, who has 2.6 million followers. Okay, Mel's got pretty good following, but it's only 134,000. And she ratioed them. You have to realize how crazy this is and how much this is breaking down. So what she's trying to show you is that they lied, which we knew. They're just pretending they didn't do it. Here's the actual pages. And she says, do you realize the old links still show the original document? So that may be why I'm still seeing that. That link still goes there, the public link. But so here's the point. Here's what it said, as we just showed you, right? Are otherwise limiting commercial relations specifically with Israeli companies or business in or with Israel or authorized by license or Israeli businesses. Okay. Here's the one that is what's supposed to be showing now. It just says federal anti-discrimination laws mean federal civil rights law that protect individual Americans from discrimination on the basis of race, color. So see, that's what even though we may disagree with the idea of racial, the point is that is the way you'd write that. If you're talking about racial discrimination, you wouldn't be like Israeli. You would just say racial discrimination. So that's what they changed it to. How is that not shocking in and of itself that they got caught and they rapidly lied about it, covered it up and said, that didn't happen. Don't mind the man behind the curtain. Okay. So back to the point, back to the articles themselves. Here's the way back version. It's on the archive and you can see it right there. Very clearly showing you that they did have this written there. Okay. I want that zoom in for me. I don't know. Oh, well, you can see it either way. For some reason, I can't get it to zoom in. Israeli companies. Very clearly, okay? So what I find interesting, and we'll come to this one next, which is even more interesting, by the way. This one does zoom in. Let's refresh it. I mean, look, this is not the Wayback Machine. This is on dhs.gov. And as far as I can tell, it still says that. Now, I don't know what I'm missing. Let me know if you guys think there's something, because as she just said, it still shows it on the link. Like, I don't know, maybe they just are that incompetent. But what I thought was interesting is Mel did show the version where it was changed. So I'm wondering whether they just literally added it back, or maybe there's some kind of a caching issue like that. That's how this works. Maybe it's going to update over the next day. What do you guys think? I genuinely want you, give me your input. Like even right now, I'll look at the chat if you guys have immediate thoughts on it. But this to me, if they added it back on top of everything, that shows you that they got pressure from the people that wanted it there. And that means that, and it's all hypothetical, that means that is more important in the moment than even as we see them, which kind of adds up with what's going on. But all that aside, all the hypothetical aside, the reality is that this is something that they added, then deleted because people saw it, and they're just lying about it. Conservatives aren't stupid, guys. People see, and I mean, Americans aren't stupid. In this case, conservatives, because that's where it's happening. The point is that they're not just as dumb as people want to make it out to be. I know it's a popular opinion to be, oh, Americans are so stupid. I don't believe that. Clearly, plenty of them are, but people are seeing this. It is breaking down in front of you. Now, this is even more interesting. S2 Underground says, after this circulated social media this morning, the Department of Homeland Security has apparently decided to secretly violate the Federal Records Act by surreptitiously editing this file. So this may be why it was added back, if that's the case. Because I'll read his case for you. This is actually really, I think completely adds up. It says they forgot to scrub the metadata from the PDF. So if you look at the metadata in the PDF, you can tell right now that they have added it and deleted it. Okay? And so what it says is they forgot to scrub the data, which confirms not only the name of the person who last edited the file, but also the exact time at which it was edited, which happened to be 4:30 p.m. today. Now, I'm curious. I might reach out to him afterward to find out if they did it again after that, added it back, which might be why right here. It says DHS deleted the PDF from their website and re-uploaded this document, hoping that no one would notice. You see, they tried to deceive you. That's why I'm talking about the junior team. They didn't think we would be able to piece that together because they're not the top. They clearly, but it says the name of the PDF itself keeps the version 3 label and the same upload date. Absolutely nothing on their website indicates that any update of the files took place, but the file is completely different. And on page 6, all references to Israel are now gone. There was no statement issued or any acknowledgement at all that the files were switched, but they were. The metadata confirms it. And you could check right here for yourself. It says, of course, some of us were keeping receipts. I have a copy of the original file, which, by the way, I just showed you, which you can download. But it goes on to say, nothing on the main website indicates a change. Even the date remains the same, but we can prove they altered it, right? What he's saying is, but the changes did occur as confirmed by a side-by-side examination, which we just showed you, right? It says, there has been zero communication from the DHS on this, even an acknowledgement that the records were changed. Now that this policy has apparently changed, he goes, I'm increasingly annoyed that I spent so much time working on it, the report, only for the policy to be changed, apparently. I myself have a few questions. Does this file switch mean that the policy is no longer in effect? Are the paper copies... I'm trying to... Did I miss the... Hold on. I was reading this earlier today. I can just tell you, I was hoping to read it in his words. The point was that doing this without acknowledging that shift violates the law. And I think that's important to understand. Try to find it. The point being is that they obviously trying to hide this from you, right? And so that they're willing, but that's not shocking to anybody. Look at what they've been doing in every other aspect of government. They will lie right to your face. They'll rob, steal, and cheat. I mean, that's what they do. I'll just continue. It's in here somewhere. He goes on to say, are the paper copies of the policy that were mailed to individual agencies still in effect? Was this a mistake or deliberate action? If this policy had not been discovered by the public, would the DHS have deleted it on their own volition? Who made the decision to include the language in the text, and who approved it? If including the language was a mistake, then how did this happen? If it was a mistake, then why did it take 4 months for identifying correct? Was there any cases where the purchase of disaster relief equipment was denied based on the entity failing to profess support for Israel? Does deleting the file without any comment or explanation constitute a de facto acknowledgement of guilt? Are there any other policies that the government agencies responsible for the issuance of grants in states which have similar policies? Yes, is the answer there. It's very clear. And they already made it clear that they will do that anyway. How am I missing this? Huh. There was a point in this that I swear I was reading earlier. Maybe it's in this one. I guess not. I must be, maybe I'm mistaken. I was reading on a secondary tweet. Either way, the point is the same. I was just hoping to read it from the way the person wrote it that I'm remembering, is the idea is that they have these things posted, and for them to alter them and not update it, in fact, to hide the fact that it changed, there's a legal reality of how the government is supposed to upkeep this information, and by not denoting that, they're violating the law. But so here, what it shows you is the metadata is very clearly shows you that they did alter this. And I just think that speaks volumes, guys. It really does. Making one last sweep here. So this person said, according to DHS, it seems the policy is still in effect. Only the unpopular wording was removed. But here we are, where, again, as I can see, it still seems to show it right now. So if they added this back, I think that says so much more than everything else together. That almost like maybe that you won't look again and then it's back there. But I'm going to follow up on this in the next couple shows and see if this updates. But the reality is that, and then going back to Jones, the rest going, good news, they pulled it back. But even if they removed the text, they made it clear that they're not doing that. So recognize people like that who are just absolute team sport cheerleaders who will go along with whatever their team says, even when you can prove that they're lying to you. Actually, I'm going to make sure I save these. We'll come back to it. All right. So last point, even though a lot of this already kind of highlights what's going on with this, is that the Israeli infiltration of this government it's never been more clear. I'm going to start with a clip here from a veteran from the USS Liberty, who, by the way, pretty much every one of them you can listen to right now, many of them are still alive, will absolutely they'll stand there and tell you right to your face that Israel attacked the U.S. government and the U.S. government covered it up. And they'll all lie to you about this today from the government, like everything else, by the way. But this is Philip Torney. He says, we've ceded our power to a foreign country, he says. Israel controls us. We don't control our country. Guys, I'm not saying you have to blindly listen to this or believe it, but if you're not considering this by now, with people like this, people with you're getting people like Glenn Greenwald and George Gallup, people that are starting to call out the ridiculousness of how obvious this is. Now, none of that should ever mean that I'm going to blindly believe it. They could all be wrong. I could be wrong, but consider it. Look into the information provided. Look through this lens. When you look at this stuff today, it's impossible to miss. Now let's start with this clip. And by the way, this Afshan Ratsani, I always have trouble saying his name for some reason, from Going Underground. This clip has been going around. A former Israeli intelligence officer. Oh, you know what? Let me grab the clip of it since I was going to make a point about it. I'll play this first. It's just simply telling you that presidents of the past were infiltrated by Israel. And I think it's funny that you got people like Jones going, breaking, this has happened, and they know it's gone on for years. And I feel like just going, oh, you're so brave. You're so brave for jumping in when now it's the most obvious. It's the dangerous safe, right? Dangerous. We were back there going, look at this. Look at what's going on. Whitney's writing books about it. Pay attention, right? Getting disregarded. Now it's everyone seeing it and they're jumping in. Then I was telling you earlier, people standing on the shoulders of everybody else. That's what they're all trying to do now. Trying to jump to the top and go, we always knew, even though they really did not, or they did and they hid it from you. Here's the first clip.
see anything in Gaza that brings me to my knees with sorrow and pain for innocents being starved and bombed and burned and beat up and raped and robbed. I'm tired of it. This whole country should be tired of it. Our passionate attachment to the Zionist state has got to stop. My biggest disappointment is our own government. We've ceded our power to a foreign country. Israel controls us. They control the Congress. They control the Senate. They control our money. We don't control our country. The Zionist state does. Does that make them the real bad people? No, the real bad people are the people letting them do it. That's the people, real bad people.
People out there have started to call this stuff out. Now, here's the clip that if it was below that, which is, I mean, it's not new. I mean, it's not even new in the context of we've seen a lot of former Israeli officials come out and tell you stuff like this, or tell you that they're funding Hamas, or tell you any number of things that are still challenged by the corporate media. Now, Afshin Ratsani has been doing great work on this for a long time, interviewing people like this. But here it is. Former Israeli intelligence officer tells Going Underground that Israel trapped multiple U.S. presidents, which we know. Rather, I think I shouldn't say, the evidence clearly shows us that we've been reporting for a long time is highly likely in regard to the Israeli infiltration of our governments. And we can literally see that Israel is influencing U.S. policy. And so when this kind of thing is tweet shared by somebody like Jones and saying, oh, it's important to see, just recognize that's my point about people, the Johnny come latelys, the jump on this. And they've been trying to, in my opinion, gaslight and cover up around this story. Now that it's impossible to miss, you got to start stepping on it and acting like you always saw it, which is typical. But add to it to realize this is, I mean, we played, which one was it? I mean, you know, Ehud Barak, plenty of others that have said some similar statements about infiltration. Even Netanyahu on leaked documents or leaked videos where he talks about being able to pit one side of the paradigm against the other, get the left to fight the right and control the U.S. government. He's talked about this before. It's not new.
Look, whether it happens or not.
Oh, hold on. That's the next clip. Here it is.
And so Jeffrey Epstein, in a way, presumably being used as a tool by the Israelis, helped to change the course of history in this region I'm speaking to you from.
Of course, a change thing. And they trapped a number of U.S. presidents by using Jeffrey Epstein. And it wasn't only about sex, it was also the money issue. Where was the money coming from?
Yeah, it's the financial links.
Financial issue, different personalities receiving money from a group of billionaire Jews that worked with the Israeli government in the United States.
Oh, you mean like Miriam Adelson?
And so,
right. Like, sorry, like literally the largest backer in regard to that discussion of oligarchs of Donald Trump, at least as we can see. Bring this up first. We'll come back to that. This is Haaretz. Oh, hold on. Ugh, I hate these things. This is Haaretz reporting that Miriam Adelson funds Donald Trump because she wants something. Her condition, West Bank annexation, which, by the way, is already happening. Mike Johnson, and we're going to show it in a second, was just at an illegal West Bank occupation, touring around like it's no big deal, like he's at Disneyland. Even according to the U.S. government, that's illegal, even though all of this is illegal. But so this is what he just described. So if your point, this is how they've infiltrated governments or presidents, well, there you go. It's exactly what he just told you. But, you know, I don't need to convince you guys. This is not secret, guys. It's very public. So even George Galloway, and I'm only saying it like that because I wouldn't have expected people at certain positions and levels, even though I think everyone should because it's honest and accurate, to have called something like this out, even though it's a valid point, because of how easy it is for people to call it racist, even though I don't think it is at all. So here is what George Galloway said. This started going around on the 3rd and the 4th. People showed Mike Johnson and a hell of a lot of others going to pray at the Wailing Wall. And this one says, Mike Johnson bowing to the Western Wall today. America is a slave of Israel. Now, that one thing does not prove that. Maybe just showing respect, right? You could argue that. I don't think that. But the reality being is that you could easily argue this is them just, showing reverence for while they're there. But here's what George said, which is really what I think adds to the point. Perfectly normal for a Christian, right? This is something that plenty of Christians will do. Third highest personage in the United States of America. He goes, I mean, where else is he supposed to pray on vacation? I mean, the church where Jesus lay is all of 100 yards away. Come to think of it, why do these people never post pictures there? You see, now that doesn't, again, maybe there's a reason. The point though, is that if you're going to talk about this as a Christian, not a Christian Zionist, but a Christian in general, and that you go here and instead of going to one of the most holy locations where Jesus literally, as he writes, the church where Jesus lay, and instead go to this place every time because it's something that Israel wants to promote, I think that speaks volumes. Now, again, on taking it that point forward, like I said earlier, you could simply argue that people in positions of power recognize Israel's influence over our government as lobbyists or whatever else, and do this because they'll say this out loud. Got people in Congress, rather when they're not in position, will make it clear that Israel is sort of a kingmaker in our Congress. That's not a secret. They just make it about allies, but it's clearly more than that. So the point is, you could simply make it about influence, and that they do this because they know Israel will get them elected or not, which in and of itself is insane to think about. But we know that it's more than that. We know this goes beyond just that this is about control. And I think that becomes very clear that now everyone's starting to see the weirdness of this, and it started to get circulated. Henry Fajord says, the U.S. president and the next two in line of succession, Vance and Johnson, they're all praying at the wall. And Caitlin Johnstone said, this is extremely weird. And it's extremely weird to pretend it's not extremely weird. It's just interesting. And she was saying the same point, by the way, that weird little thing they did with Trump and that globe in Saudi Arabia. But the point is simply that this is starting to be called out, and people are not afraid to be called racist because I think in most cases, they're not. I think that there's general sentiment. I think that's the case. The reality is they're just going, that's strange to me, and aren't afraid to be called out by people trying to claim you're racist by simply acknowledging the obvious. And here's even people like Gunther Eagleman, all these blind team sport followers who even they are starting to go, oh, okay, like I can't just lose everything. They're going to start calling the thing. I think it's weird to see how they have been holding this line and all of a sudden they start pulling away. He says, still haven't heard back from Speaker Johnson. So this feels to me like Johnson is the scapegoat. If Johnson's the one, they're going to start trying to make it out to be the problem, not anybody else. Don't look at anybody else. Even though it's like, honestly, almost everybody else in his administration is far for, at least presented forward as blindly pro-Zionist. But I think he's in the same boat for sure. It says, he lied to me and everyone else on Twitter space. Shocking. A politician lied to you? Wow. I mean, think about what a naive thing that is to say. Did Gunther think they were always telling the truth? They're politicians, bud. And it says, when he said the recess would be spent in his district. Yeah, because they're liars, man. And clearly it was about Epstein, I think. But either way, there's probably more going on. Nick Sorter goes, now Mike Johnson in Israel at the Western Wall wearing a kippah. See, this is what I keep trying to point out about some of them. They don't go off like they usually would in other context. If it was a Democrat, going, I can't believe he looks so, I can't believe this. They just kind of state the thing and just don't say anything about it because I didn't mean anything bad by it. But knowing that this is something that people want him to call out, or at least think to be perceived as calling out. I think these are blind. These people are tiptoeing around the story because they don't want to lose what they've gained. They're not. I don't think any of these people are truly in your interest. My opinion. But they're all going after Mike, even though all of them have done it. Isn't that strange? Glenn Greenwald says, more America first, House Republicans make pilgrimage to Israel. This is all from today and yesterday. And over, they're there over the couple of days, but this has all been really focused on all these different politicians are in Israel right now. Why? Why does that always seem to happen? And it says a pilgrimage to Israel in order to, in the words of the totally American lobbyist group AIPAC, he's being facetious, to quote, begin their week-long educational seminar in Israel. What? It says Mike Johnson is there. They should hold U.S. congressional committee votes in Tel Aviv. That's Glenn Greenwald. AIPAC hosting the message of your politicians telling you why they love Israel. It's just so insane right now. And here's an interesting overlap to all this. This is the Homeland Security account, DHS.gov. Here's what it literally says. It's quoting Theodore Roosevelt, when they like to selectively apply to certain things. It says, quote, there's no room in this country for hyphenated Americanism. Americanism is a matter of the spirit and of the soul. Our allegiance must be purely to the United States. This is what they're writing. We must unsparingly condemn any man who holds any other allegiance. And then they post the Blaze document that says, Representative Delia Ramirez at the summit in Mexico City this week tells the audience in Spanish, I'm a proud Guatemalan before I'm an American. And that's what they choose to make the issue about. Sort of like the ones all head faking toward the Somalia discussion. Look, the reality is, for those of us being honest about this, it's not just about Israeli citizenship, but any other foreign country, which is what Massey put forward, what anybody real about this is putting forward. These people are so embarrassingly desperate to hide the one thing, like we just saw with the Israel aid discussion, to make just going, oh my God, we can't allow that. They support Mexico instead of the United States. Like we don't all see what you're doing. And look, the reality is the same point, because we're not all children like you, DHS. The reality that if she is a Mexican citizen, which I believe she is, and she's working, or rather Guatemalan, and she's working for the U.S. government, that either matters or it doesn't, guys. We either care about people who have citizenship from another government, which I think should matter, or we don't. Clearly, we all seem to recognize that even our government says that, but only doesn't when it comes to Israel. I mean, these points today just scream for themselves. I don't know how anyone can misunderstand that. And on top of it, how embarrassing is that they will come after this or Somalia as if that's the only thing we can see when it is the whole world can see you've Brian Mast marching down Congress in his IDF uniform. It's wild. I've never seen it this shockingly clear in my entire life. This conversation, I've never seen this as obvious as it is right now. It's just absolutely insane. Another point. That's right. Let me grab this. Hold on. This is Vivek Ramaswamy, which is interesting. I haven't, he's kind of drifted away. I think it seems he made the right choice and got his name out of the way before all this went real crazy. Because he's a grifter in his own right. We saw the way he manipulated the pharmaceutical field, lied, kind of a pump and dump in pharmaceutical world, and just, these people are grifters, man. When he says, shocking to hear a member of Congress openly states her loyalty to another country. Are you joking? That's insane. I've never seen more politicians, whether they're Israeli citizens or not, stand up and declare loyalty to a foreign country than Israel at anything I've ever seen in my life. And yet here he is making this point. It just screams the opposite of what they're trying to do. If your primary allegiance is to a different nation, then you shouldn't be allowed to make laws and bind Americans. You're right, Vivek. That's not controversial. It's obvious. You're right. Now, dabble into the comments and see what literally everybody's pointing out to you. Everybody. He knows he's not stupid. He's part of the problem, I think. So here's Caitlin Johnstone showing you that problem. This woman, just one example of what we're being shown still to this day, is such a disgusting, manipulative liar, she writes. It still astonishes me, she writes, how brazenly, how shamelessly Israel's defenders lie all the time. Now, it's worth considering that some of them might just actually believe these lies because they don't look outside their trusted sources. But either way, that's your responsibility, seeing as how public all of this is right now. It says all of them, every single one of them, without a single solitary exception, they're just stunningly evil. She says, I've never gotten used to it. So you're going to hear her lay out these narratives that are just insanely wrong, that we can prove every which way. I was just calling out Randy Fine, another supposed America First politician who in every way puts Israel first, lying about October 7th still, saying 1,200 people. That number they put that down early from Israel. And yet they all still keep saying the false number or claiming that they were all killed by Hamas. We know that's not true now, easily. They're the kind of people that still talk about beheaded babies. They are the most compromised, if that's even, it's hard. These are my opinions, but it just shows you that they are let's put it this way. In my opinion, there are people that are compromised, blackmailed, right? Or coerced into supporting them. Then they're the ones that just actually support them, regardless of a genocide. And that's what I think Randy Fine is. He is on their team. And I don't mean even in regard to religion. I'm talking about what they're accomplishing from a government perspective. It's clear that he doesn't need to be coerced. At least that's what I would argue. This person on CNN is laying out the false narrative just like that.
Happens or not,
Well, look, whether it happens or not, frankly, the truth is Israel should have never left Gaza, because before 2005, we did not have a terrorist state. We had a booming economy.
It's all BS. And the reality is they didn't leave Gaza, right? They've always occupied it. They pulled out their people and, in fact, also forcefully removed all the Jewish people that lived there as well. And this is just like everywhere else we're talking about it. She goes on to lie about the reality of that. And people keep doing this online. Like, where are all the Christians? Where are all Well, guess what, guys? Syria, for example, had the third largest Christian population of all of the Middle East until Israel and the United States destroyed it. Same thing with Iraq. They destroyed these things. And you can kind of systematically show that Israel has been focusing on the Christian populations pretty much everywhere they go. Same thing with Syria, by the way, right now. So these people are either just that stupid, that blind, or that dishonest.
We had equality for the sexes. We did not have a terrorist state. We had a booming economy. We had equality for the sexes. We didn't have gays being...
That doesn't even exist in Israel right now, by the way. You're not allowed to marry, like you can have a relationship, I guess, but it's frowned upon, but you're not allowed. Alan McLeod pointed that out. Think about all the lies they push. And it's just, so they're over there praising the good thing. That's not even the reality there.
Thrown off rooftops, but when Israel dragged every last man, woman, and child out of Gaza and exhumed the dead bodies because they knew...
Oh, you'll excuse her for meaning only the Jewish population. Even though she says every man, woman, and child, she forgets that all the Palestinian men, women, and children that are there still. Oops. But to these people, they're not real. They don't exist. They're not human. As Megyn Kelly will tell you, they'd rather watch their children starve than not kill Jews, or whatever the way she framed it as. Like, it's insane levels of sociopathy or just hate. It's crazy.
What Hamas would do with it. We had a terrorist state, and that's a big mistake, and the world is yet to admit that. And the real question is, why is the world preventing Gazans from leaving Gaza? Why are they insisting that they remain as human hostages for...
I mean, this has got to be the dumbest person in the room. Unless she just thinks those lies will work, right? She is regurgitating things that nobody believes, other than lying propagandists. Like, why did the world... How did she frame that?
That. And the real question is, why is the world preventing Gazans from a big mistake? And the world is yet to admit that.
To admit that they're about, like, you realize her argument that the world doesn't argue that Hamas is a terrorist group. I mean, literally, it seems everybody, even the ones that are trying to support the armed resistance point, they're still not arguing that they're not armed. It's just a weird thing to reframe as they're like, everyone's on the side of Gaza. Well, today that seems like it's growing to that point. But that's not how this started. But they have to continue to frame it as the victim, as always. And the idea that anybody is forcing Palestinians to stay. You see how clumsy this has gotten, where it starts with they're claiming that Hamas was forcing them to stay, but that's clearly not working anymore. So they just act like the world is just saying, you have to stay there. It's not only disgusting, it's false, but it's not only disgusting, you are taking people who are putting their lives on the line for what they truly believe in and diminishing that to it's not even their choice. That apparently the rest of the world can somehow decide what they do and do not do. She's a child.
And the real question is, why is the world preventing Gazans from leaving Gaza? Why are they insisting that they remain as human hostages for Hamas and as civilian human shields? And the third point really is, are they refugees or are they not refugees? Because if Gazans are Palestinian refugees, then Gaza is not their home.
Oh my God. You see the ignorance of this? She doesn't even understand what she's talking about. The reality, look, if you are displaced from your home, which is greater Israel, and moved to camps within parts of Gaza, that is within parts of what was Palestine, and you still literally have the keys in some cases to the homes they took. UNRWA, which you probably have no idea, you call it a terrorist organization, was literally there in order to, this is how it began, to keep track of the right of return. And they kept track, and because this was not supposed to be something that went on for decades and decades. They're supposed to, once the fighting stopped, let them go back to their homes as international law requires. And they never, ever allowed that. And they kept denying it. And they kept pushing it away. And in fact, today we can prove that when they were killing many of these people, they were demanding that they give facial scans and give back their keys and denounce on video that they had any right to return. The thing they kept pretending wasn't true. So to argue somehow that because they're refugees that they never lived in the place. I mean, guys, it's just, I don't even have words to express what a disgusting thing that is. And here they are on the main channel. And some people still fall for this stuff.
And they should be relocated so that they are not used by Hamas as human shields. If Gaza is their home, then the entire premise upon which the whole Israeli-Palestinian conflict is based and the right of return is false. The only people being deliberately starved in Gaza are the hostages right now.
Can you even believe this? This is countered by every data point we have. Like, for example, the fact that every single hostage that has come out, save for a couple that were slightly less, they weren't emaciated, not a single one. They come out and they're saying we were fed, they took care of us. Now realize, guys, even they will be diminished because they're denying food for everyone. The argument that somehow that the only people suffering, like, how do you even make that make sense about all the Palestinians? Isn't your argument alternatively that the Hamas is stealing from Palestinians? So then how can you argue that not any Palestinian is suffering? Like, you see, this is driven by pure hatred and dehumanization of who these people are. But yet at the same time, when it works for your gross narrative, you make it out to be you protecting the Palestinians that you secondarily think are gross and act like are all terrorists when it suits your narrative. Kills me. Now, I think this guy's about to jump in and make some points.
You look at Evitar David. He looks like a concentration camp survivor who was forced to dig his own grave.
Oh, you mean that new image that came out? Well, yes, because people there are all starving to death. Every single one of them, because you're not letting food in for any of them. And yet now you make it about, and what about every single one of them before that? You see, she is not, I don't know who she is, but people with the most basic intelligence, or somebody who claims to be following the story, is probably aware, as Caitlin's pointing out, all the other hostages have different stories. Or rather, the same story. All of them telling you they were fed. And so she comes out and lies. And lies to continue genocide. Lies to continue starvation of children. Lies to continue rape and torture and everything else. That is who she is.
The body of Eden Yerushalmi, after she was murdered, was returned. She was 70 pounds. Contrast that to the pictures, these, I'll say, artistic pictures of children, most of them with
artistic pictures? My God, where did they find these people?
Really,
Brooke?
Yes, really.
I mean,
yes,
really,
you're propaganda
saying
pictures of these children. You never see pictures of adults.
The pictures of...
Are you kidding me? You see, she doesn't even know what she's talking about. There is an endless procession of starving adults. There's an endless procession of starving children with and without secondary conditions. But does that somehow make it not a problem that you're starving children with special needs? She's just following along with these disgusting Zionist talking points.
Famine is not selective, Peter. You can't have a child who's starving and then the mother is
Brooke, are we really,
overweight or the brother is fully fed.
The picture of Eviatar David was horrifying. Are we really debating whether people are starving in Gaza?
No, we're debating who is responsible.
Because it sounds like you're saying that these are made-up pictures.
Who is responsible
for
any food shortages
Okay, so let's
in Gaza.
acknowledge that there are people...
Before they even answer, you already know the answer, guys, because it's been ISIS-linked groups that Israel's been working with that we've proven 10 times over, that Robert broke down for you, that we had an interview about, that we've been proving before that. They were the ones that were passing through, they were being forced to pass through because of the way Israel designed the earliest aspect of this, and they were stealing food and selling at higher prices. And now those groups that, by the way, the reason you can prove it is because the Knesset made these statements, are the same groups that were working with before that are ISIS linked and are now running the GHF. They said that in public, or rather in their Knesset, their Congress, or the parliament. So we know that. And they're the groups that are executing people in broad daylight on video that Green Berets and World Food Program are telling. We watched them shoot at them. And this kind of person is trying to gaslight you into ignoring all of that.
Starving in Gaza.
Hamas responsible?
Why don't you?
Hamas
I think you should let me finish
because you spoke the way that you let me finish last time. Does Hamas steal food and use it as a food weapon?
You just spoke for a long time. Let me just say something.
Does Hamas steal food?
The Palestinians in Gaza are indeed refugees. It's true. They are the descendants, most of them, of families that were expelled from Israel in 1948. So if Gaza is not habitable for them, because Israel has destroyed most of the schools, most of the churches, most of the mosques, most of the bakeries, most of the agriculture.
Look at the contempt on her face. Look at her smug. Like, this is what Caitlin's talking about. There's a decorum here that you can have, whether you disagree or not. She is disgusting. I have no idea who she is. I'm speaking specifically to what you're watching her do. That speaks so much about who she is as a person. Now, whether it's just because she's misinformed and doesn't want to be wrong, the point is you're still recognizing contradictions and powering through because you care more about being right, if that's the case, than you do about being wrong about children being starved to death. It's too much, guys. Too much. I mean, it's too much.
Most of the universities, then they should be allowed to return to the places from which they're from, which is not Burundi or Somalia or Rwanda. It's Israel, right? If you want to give them a place to go out of Gaza, allow them to go back to the places from which their families were expelled.
I think you have a problem with cause and effect. You like to blame Israel for everything. Israel did not destroy.
As always, you make a very specific, valid point about the historical facts. You just blame Israel. And where in there did he blame it? You obviously, being logical, you can understand that stems back to Israel's the Nakba, but he didn't say that. Her reaction is step one, anti-Semite. Step two, you hate Israel. It's just the same old stupid cycle. She's clearly not that intelligent. She's not holding arguments very well. And that's probably why she's there.
Destroy their hospitals, destroy their schools.
No.
The schools and the hospitals that I've been to have been used as places for rocket depots, and most of those hospitals are used as Hamas for their headquarters.
So she just pretended she's been to Gaza? You're a clown. Do you realize that nobody, not even journalists, are getting in there? Think about how insane that is. This woman deserves to be made fun of through all of social media. Please, somebody pick this up. She just actually lied about being in Gaza and seeing the depots, which, by the way, are false. For 1,000 reasons we've overlapped with it, even the UN groups or even the human rights groups who have had moments in there through different aspects of opening have recognized that lie. She's pretending she's been there. Been in a militarized controlled zone where they're executing people at will and seen these places that nobody, not even journalists, have been allowed to see. This is the kind of BS you get. It's, again, it's just whatever it is. Driving her is either that she's been driven. I mean, I don't, it's not even worth assuming. My point is that she must recognize that somebody can think that through, unless she's just that stupid.
Headquarters. Hamas is responsible when you have your headquarters under a hospital, and you shoot.
Oh, you mean Al-Shifa? That's what she's referring to. That did not even remotely pan out. They got laughed at and exposed. They didn't, even the New York Times broke it down as that they lied about the command center. She's just reporting things written down on a piece of paper, guys. That's who we're dealing with.
Rockets into a civilian
where is Israel's
population.
military headquarters located?
Exactly.
And you shoot.
I have a question. Where is Israel, the Kiryat? Where is Israel's military locators headquarters? Is it in a remote area?
Israel has military
answer the question.
everywhere.
Where is Israel?
Targets.
No.
Are they
Brooke, you didn't answer my question. Where is Israel's military? It is in downtown Tel Aviv.
And by the way, she just said they're targets. Weird response. So you just claimed that Israel's Tel Aviv central downtown area is a legitimate target because they put a base there. Which that's a debatable argument, but that's definitely not what Zionists wanted to say.
Let me say that.
They have a headquarters in Tel Aviv.
You got to let me finish. Israel's military headquarters is in downtown Tel Aviv, right? Many of the apartment buildings in Tel Aviv house Israeli generals. Under international law, you don't have the right to destroy the schools around Israel's military headquarters or to
Israel
destroy.
Does
no, let me
not
finish.
Shoot rockets from downtown Tel Aviv into civilian populations.
Israel has its military infrastructure deeply embedded within the civilian infrastructure as well. And in international law, it would be a war crime to destroy a hospital or an apartment building in Tel Aviv because an Israeli general is there.
Yep.
Similarly, it is a violation of international law.
She's shaking her head because she's wrong, by the way, and just doesn't know what to say. She's wrong. That's the same point we made in the very beginning. Whether or not there were people in Gaza, they bombed every hospital, every school, everything. And they never, regardless of their narrative, even half the time the narratives they gave still didn't make it legal or collective punishment. Same point, as they just kept going, well, they're there. Every single example you could prove they were breaking the law. They didn't care.
To destroy a hospital or university or school in Gaza just because you believe that there are Hamas.
It is a violation of international law to use civilians as human shields. Can we agree on that?
Yes, and that is.
Do you support the temporary relocation of Gazans so that they are not
God forbid I do not.
Human...
I don't want Palestinians expelled again. The Palestinians were expelled in 1948. You want to expel them again?
No.
That's a war crime,
That's not what I said.
Hang on one second. Temporary. You think Israel's going to allow them back if they leave? Come on.
All right. I want to bring others into
Yeah, you see her mouth's going dry. You can see her. It's just funny. Like she's clearly outside of her zone. She is not. I think the reason you get her is the same reason you get Noam and Bondi and Hegseth in the executive branch, because nobody wants to be in these positions because it's ridiculous. Whether it's because you don't want to blindly support a foreign country over your own, or because they act like morons and lie and make you look like a clown because your principles don't matter. You know, Tulsi Gabbard comes out and says, this is what matters. And Trump's like, I don't care what she thinks. And then through some weird shame ritual, she's forced to post her own video that says what he says doesn't matter. And she says that's not what it means. And you can watch it where it literally says what she says it doesn't mean. It's just insane what we're watching right now. And I agree with Caitlin Johnstone. These people are disgusting and very disgusting. Now, I just retweeted this again. I just said, seems today more than ever, the veil is being removed and people are seeing what the Israeli government is doing, the genocide and the infiltration of U.S. government and others. So I will repost this thread of just Trump and just before this election, which I do think is very relevant to what's going on. As always, watch them for yourself. An endless thread of the many times, just not all of them, by the way, but before the process where he's telling you he will act for Israel's interest over your own. Now, talking about infiltration, this is a really very insightful post here. Now, this is a clip from mainstream media in France. French 24. Yeah, France 24. And the point is, it's, not some fringe place, which you guys probably know. France 24 is a large platform. They caught settlers, or rather, I would argue probably intelligence, but some Israeli assets who were dressed up like Palestinians, initiated throwing rocks at the IDF, and then in the midst of doing so, turned around and opened fire with their guns and arrested Palestinians. Nothing new. The reality is not just that they were there, but that they are the ones that create the problem and then use that to go after Palestinians. And it's not new. It is actually a very common practice, and it's something that we'll show you here, even like as Judge Napolitano's talking about. Disguise themselves as doctors and female nurses to infiltrate hospitals, which, by the way, you've already seen. That happened right here during the ongoing October 7th forward genocide, where they broke in, dressed like Palestinians, some in wheelchairs, and then executed people in hospital beds, no matter who they were. That's a violation of the law. But here's the clip. As the squirrel points out, look carefully at this video captured by French TV crew without the Israelis knowing it. A group of Palestinians are gathered for a protest, then 4 of them pick up rocks and throw them at the Israeli soldiers. But they are not Palestinians. They're Zionist Jews in disguise. And they suddenly turn around and begin shooting the Palestinians and beating and torturing them to death. Another day for Palestinians.
For at least half an hour, the 4 men had been throwing stones at Israeli soldiers as part of a group of Palestinians. Then they took out their pistols and opened fire on the group of protesters they'd been standing alongside moments before.
Okay, look at it, guys. Right? So there's 2 things to consider here. One, well, that any number of Mossad agents or Israelis have similar colored skin. Secondarily, that they also, as Roberts pointed out many times, very much utilize Palestinian infiltrators, people that are willing to work for Mossad to get a better home or a better access to things. Like that's reality. Collaborators, rather, is the way to put it. So what you're seeing, whichever way that goes, are people that are working for Israel, right? That literally start throwing rocks at the IDF and then just turn around and open fire on the people they're with. And then, well, let me finish the clip first.
And opened fire on the group of protesters they'd been standing alongside moments before.
And dragging away this guy, which is probably what it was about.
According to the AFP journalist who filmed what happened at the Beit El checkpoint outside
Ramallah. So right there, my gut would tell me that that's who it was about. But they set this all up. They got them in a position where they were doing what the IDF did to themselves, and then used that as the justification to go after the person they wanted to get. Sounds very similar to the FBI.
A cry of Mustarabin soon spread through the 100-strong crowd. It's a word that describes people who disguise themselves as Arabs. In the footage, the infiltrators are seen beating a man and shooting their guns before being joined by Israeli soldiers in uniform.
Look at that. Entrapment, anybody? What goes on to say, the genocidal Israeli death and rape cult, he writes, operates a vast network of Zionist Jews who disguise themselves as Palestinians, called, as they were just saying, Mustarabin. They infiltrate Palestinian communities, sow discord, hatred. They blackmail, they rape, they murder, they torture sadistic beasts. Now, look, this is not a secret. Israeli agents who pose as Palestinians. Now, you should never assume that everything bad you see, therefore, is Israeli agents. But realize this is what they do, and have many cases like that been caught doing the kind of things they then go, that's what Palestinians do. If you can't by now see that this is the way Zionism operates, where they literally create, I mean, whether it stems from that they really think that or not, or just want to frame them for what they want people to see them as, this is a, like, what's the Mossad state? Through deceit, thou shalt make war, or some paraphrasing. That's what their motto is, guys. So it goes on. This is a clip from John Meisharmer and Judge Napolitano is saying the agents also routinely disguise themselves as doctors and female nurses to infiltrate hospitals to mass murder patients. Being part of the military force and disguising yourself as a civilian is perfidy, I think, which is one of the most disgusting and depraved war crimes. But they don't care. Again, guys, it's literally praised by the corporate media when they did it right here in Gaza. That's how disgusting this is. Here's the clip for first of John Napolitano. Oh, wait. I guess I missed it somehow. Let me grab that. I'm sure I probably got it and just didn't miss it. I'll find it right now. It's frustrating when I do this and then it ends up being something I did have. So I do, as I'm grabbing this, I do find it interesting. I don't know if you would call it transition, but, Judge Napolitano has been very critical of a lot of this stuff. And I think I'm glad to see that. Let's do, there you go. I just wonder what conservatives may think about it. Seeing it critical of Trump is not really popular for a lot of conservatives. Yeah, I did miss it. How funny. Here it is.
Have you ever heard or read about in your studying of modern warfare of soldiers or intelligence agents, males dressing as females, dressing as healthcare workers, going into a hospital and shooting in the head 3 patients who were being ministered to by healthcare workers in the hospital?
My God, look at this clip. It's like 13 seconds, 15 seconds delayed. What is going on? I should stop bringing it up, but I'm sorry about that, guys. Apparently it's completely outside of my control. I could literally screen caption and play it for you on my computer and it would play perfectly. But when I upload it to StreamYard, it gives me like a whole delay. Anyway, this is about the case we just showed you of when they did this in Gaza. That's what they're talking about. Again, I apologize for the lack of coordination with the audio and the visual.
I've never heard of an instance of that. And I'm not surprised that the Israelis did it. I think the Israelis don't pay any serious attention to the rules of war. And they think they can do pretty much anything they want and get away with it because the United States will protect them. And I also think that, one of the things I find most disturbing about watching what's happening in Gaza is it's not just simply the killing. That's categorically depressing, don't misunderstand me, but it's also just the cruelty that's involved here. The Israelis seem to take a certain joy in inflicting punishment, inflicting cruelty on the Palestinians. And it's just horrible what's going on. And this is just another instance of them just not caring at all about the basic rules of the game and doing whatever they think is necessary, and oftentimes doing it in a very cruel and evil way.
Let me know in the chat, by the way, anybody watching right now, was that out of sync on your side? If that hasn't been the case, let me know. Maybe it's just something on my side. I'm just confounded by that. It's just one of those things that, you know me by now probably enough. These things just get under my skin. These little tiny things like that. It's a lack of control. The fact that it's something like that keeps happening that I can't do anything about drives me crazy. But let me know if that was out of sync for you. It's just very strange. Like here, I wonder if I can get, let's watch this. Here is the video I just downloaded.
Have you ever?
Okay, now check it out. This is just on the browser. You probably can't hear it otherwise through my mic. But look, it's in sync.
Heard or read about in your studying of modern warfare of soldiers or intelligence agents.
I just think that's hilarious. Anyway. So, yeah, it's off for you guys too. Oh, well, I guess that's the world of technocracy for us today. Now back to the point. So we're talking about them, basically IDF members throwing rocks, and others join in, and then they turn around and shoot Palestinians for what they initiated, right? Well, check this out. This is from the 3rd of August. And Patrick Henningsen says, yes, this is the actual headline from the Israeli media today. We're dealing with truly sick and deranged, rabid society here. This level of institutionalized state violence has no place in the 21st century civilized world. Photo proves eliminated terrorist was about to throw rock. Why is that going just that way? That's so weird. What's going on with my computer today? About to. Photo proves eliminated terrorist was about to throw rock. That's actually what that says. How insane is that? And the point being, isn't that what we just saw? And so the question is, are we, I'm not saying it's this exact same incident, maybe. The point is that, how do we know that that's what actually happened? How do we not know that it was Palestinians, or rather IDF members pretending to be, that threw the rocks and came? Well, we just saw that, didn't we? I agree with him. I think there's a very real problem. Let me look at this real quick. See, that's weird. So I can zoom in anywhere like that over here. But on this one, I can't. Let me refresh it and see what happens. Yeah, now I can. So weird. Maybe my computer is the problem. Anyway, coming back to this. It's funny how somebody just laughed about this with me the other day, how casual I've become with this, like just in stuff like that. I remember at one point I was just like terrified to go off the script. It was such a long time ago. Not script in the sense of like, actually, the truth is when I first started this, I did have like things written out because I was afraid to like make, I was just super worried about, I think the best thing to do in this for new people out there trying to do it, just be yourself. Just go at it. Be who you are. Be casual. People want honesty today, I think. That's why they're seeing all this, calling it out. But so we're talking about them manipulating all this, the fake, the infiltration. And I think it's worth us playing this clip yet again from the pager attack and how they describe what they do in regard to infiltrating or having fake, front companies, and that they think they can do this anywhere in the world. I think this speaks volumes to where we currently are and what they're capable of doing.
How did you convince Hezbollah to buy this?
Well, obviously.
See, this one's in sync for me. I don't know what the difference is.
They didn't know that they were buying it from Israel.
Who did they buy it from, or think they were buying it from?
We have an incredible array of possibilities of creating foreign companies that have no way being traced back to Israel. Shell companies over shell companies who affect the supply chain to our favor.
I mean, guys, that's insane. Like, why is she not going, what? Like everyone, what they just made clear is that the Israeli government is working through companies that we don't know are their government, that are peppered across the world, that they conduct operations through. How is that? I mean, imagine if that was China that said that. It just shows you how clearly this is not this. There is a problem here that goes to the highest levels of power across the world. But it is beginning to be seen. It's beginning to diminish, at least as it appears to be, at least from our view. That's what they're telling you, though. They will do. They'll infiltrate companies. They'll create fake companies. We keep reporting that in multiple different ways. On top of that, they believe they're above international law, as they've said publicly in the Knesset more than once. And this shows you that.
We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay. We're the directors. We're the producers. We're the main actors. And the world is our stage.
I mean, it doesn't even need comment. That's the quiet part out loud, guys. And they are shoving it in your face. 60 Minutes is going, good for you. Donald Trump goes to our ally. And that's what they're showing you. Well, in case you missed it, this is just one. I think it was 75% of the people hurt in those attacks were women and children. Here's one of them. A young victim of Israel's pager attack. He says, quote, I was playing on my phone at home. I heard the pager ring. I didn't know that sound. I grabbed it and barely had time to press OK before it exploded. Now, this isn't a kid that had, his father is not some massive Palestinian terrorist. He's just a random kid. They tried to make, or rather specifically in Lebanon. So Hezbollah. The point, though, is that there's plenty of examples of these kids that were not, connected to some government thing or some Hezbollah. They were just a random person who just happened to have one. They lied about what they did. They flooded these throughout Lebanon, and that's what Israel does. They want you to be scared. They look, if you don't do what we say, this is what's going to continue. That's what terrorism is. That is what's important to understand, that that's where this actually comes from. What we understand as terrorism was born by Zionism. I think that's really important to understand. It's been the case, I mean, for so many other things. I'm going to play this clip, and I'm going to play one at the end I think is important around Zionism.
The Zionists have used it and brought it, in fact, to the area. Terrorism, as we know it today, the planting of bombs in marketplaces and so on and so forth, was, in fact, introduced into the Middle East by the Zionists in the 1920s. But the net result of Zionist terrorism and violence in the first third of the 20th century has brought forth, to my mind, the anomaly, the horrific and unacceptable status in the Middle East today of the State of Israel, which is, in fact, an armed garrison state, which now exports more arms and distributes violence all around the world, vastly disproportionate to its size. I mean, in that respect, I think it's a horrible cycle of violence. But in it all, I think the Palestinian is the victim. There's no question about that.
Well, to wrap up here, guys, here's B'Tselem, which you already know. This is actually not new for those that have been watching the show, but in case you haven't been, this is just a recent post from July 28, 2025. B'Tselem, the leading Israeli human rights group. Israel is committing genocide. Just, every single day, there's more people that are beginning to find the courage to call this out. Now, they've been here for a long time. There have been for a long time. Just want to make sure we saw this as the new post. Asal Rod points out Israel just bombed the Red Crescent headquarters. Nobody's, I barely even, they're not even reporting this stuff anymore. The Red Crescent headquarters. They're just, she writes, they're still killing medics and it barely registers as news anymore because that's what they do. Apparently no one cares anymore, at least in the mainstream. As Aaron Mate wrote, I don't think any state in history has been given this degree of impunity to carry out such incessant, sadistic, genocidal evil as Israel has in Gaza. Yet another photo of dead people piled high every single day. And that's what anti-war will show you. Every single day, hundreds of people are being killed, at least as we can prove. Probably a hell of a lot more than that. This is from today. Israeli forces launched a heavy strike with 4 missiles targeting the UNRWA clinic building. Over and over and over. This is in how do you say that? Makausi area, Gaza City. The second strike in a short time. Why? Are we still pretending that's Hamas? Are we still pretending like there are tunnels and human shields within this decimated sand, just completely, just everything in there is destroyed. Look at all of the images coming out from drones. It is gone. And yet they're still relentlessly bombing them and their crowds and their tents. And they're claiming bad guys because these are monsters we're talking about. And lastly, I'll go over this more in the next show. Netanyahu plans full Israeli occupation of Gaza. That is new. That's August 4th from antiwar.com. Here's Khaleesi. Trump gives Israel green light for full military occupation of Gaza. Senior figure in Israeli office or in Netanyahu's office has confirmed that Israel has decided to fully occupy Gaza. Now, we'll go into this more in tomorrow. Same with Robert's points on this, but generally speaking, he says that there's only really 2 possibilities, that this is a deception or Netanyahu has lost his mind, meaning that this isn't in their benefit other than we've talked about this more than once in the past, that if this happens, even with the U.S. involvement, this crosses a line. And then ultimately, you're going to see this kind of spin out already losing essentially to Lebanon, Syria, all the different things happening, all the multi-fronts of war. Or this is a deception to manipulate us into, for example, moving Palestinians another place. But I'll go through more of his logic in tomorrow. I'm going to be doing an interview with Robert coming up soon. The point simply is this is what is being discussed on mainstream media. Occupation is coming. Here's what Donald Trump said, and then we'll end with a clip about this. But Trump is telling you, whatever Israel wants to do, sure sounds like somebody who cares about international law or totally isn't completely bound by what Israel wants.
Israel reoccupying all of Gaza has been suggested by some Israeli officials?
Well, I don't know what the suggestion is. I know that we are there now trying.
He just literally told you what it is. The occupation of Gaza. Clown.
To get people fed. As you know, $60 million was given by the United States fairly recently to supply food and a lot of.
Yeah, which was used to murder them, just like with the pier. And realize, guys, he just said in a recent interview, and I got nothing for it. Like trying to in certain contexts, in certain venues, trying to make it look like he's angry with that and we're pushing back on Israel. No, you're not, man. I don't care what kind of head fakes and narratives you give. You're supporting the genocide just like Biden did. You're funding it. You're continuing to support it. You're not. If you wanted to, you could end this today. Just like any other U.S. president, because you control you. There's a reason they need your support here. No matter what your narratives are, you keep supporting the genocide.
A lot of food, frankly, for the people of Gaza that are obviously not doing too well with the food. And I know Israel's going to help us with that in terms of distribution and also.
Yeah, so what he means is the new shift. We'll get into it tomorrow. The shift away from the failing thing they're doing now, which is just a fake effort to kill them, to shift into a new fake effort to kill them. And that's what's going to happen. And by the way, with other groups that we've already shown you are compromised. We'll gravitate away from the ISIS-linked groups that we were using before to use other groups. What's going to happen? More killing of Palestinians in the guise of aid. Again, if we talk about action and outcome, why would we think otherwise? Every single time what they do is hurt them. And here we are again.
Money. We also have the Arab states are going to help us with that in terms of the money and possibly distribution. So that's what I'm focused on. As far as the rest of it, I really can't say. That's going to be pretty much up to Israel. Yeah, please.
Yeah. It's up to them whether they want to violate international law and keep committing a genocide, which actually it is. But the idea that you just blithely dismiss that as some it's up for them, that's their call, it's not my decision. You are complicit in this genocide, Donald Trump and Biden and everybody in this U.S. government. You are complicit. You are part of this. There's no decoupling yourself from it. And that's likely why they're trying to act like they're just trying to, they're bound to it, but act like they're not necessarily the ones making the decisions. Nonetheless, you are a co-belligerent. That is the fact. So I'm deciding right now, since that was the point, if I want to end with the clip. Oh, here, one more thing I want to show you. With the Zionist clip. Let me know in the chat. Do you want the 5-minute Zionist clip about the reality of Zionism and a Jewish rabbi telling you how it's infiltrated this government? And do you want that? Or do you want the clip of the Green Beret and what he saw on the Tucker interview? Palestinians be, the child murdered, what they saw them doing at that Gaza, the health checkpoint. Let me know in the chat what you want. The first one to respond. Patrick Henningsen pointing us at this is the Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, saying Gaza is an experiment by the mega rich to show the peoples of the world how they will respond to a rebellion of humanity. They plan to bomb us all. Very important and powerful thing to say from somebody in a position of power, saying, and this was at the Hague Group Summit, saying people to stand up to this kind of destructive effort or genocide. They're showing you what they'll do. We will bomb, we will attack, we will undermine, we will threaten, we will scapegoat, we will blackmail, we will do anything. We will bomb you into the streets. And I think this is what people are starting to see. And I think it's not, this is why I think this has imploded. It's working against them now. Thank God. All right, well, let's end with this clip, guys, and I'll leave this for you. Thank you for tuning in today. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you for continuing to support this platform. People like this, whether it's TLAV or others, need your support, guys. So many people out there doing amazing work. There's just, lean into those that continue to show you that they care about what they're saying, continue to show you that they have principles. Whatever those may be, for crying out loud, whether I agree with them or not, at least people that stick to them, you can respect that. So find those people out there that truly embody those things, that have integrity and don't challenge or ignore it the moment it's in their interest. You see it too. Thank you for being here. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
No. I was with him until he said the eternal capital of the Jewish people. President Trump has the right to make whatever foreign policy he wants, and if he feels that Miami Beach is best to recognize as the capital of Israel, that's his business, he can do it. But once he starts talking about the Jewish people, now he's encroaching upon religion, and now that's my domain. There is absolutely no political relationship between the Jewish people and Jerusalem. It's merely a holy city. The Jewish people don't have a capital. We never had a capital. Countries have capitals. States have capitals. That's the definition of a capital. Capital. Dictionary. Noun, the most important city or town of a country or region. Now, the Jewish people are not a country or region. The Jewish people are a religious community. We pray towards Jerusalem, but we relate to Jerusalem only as a holy city, not as a political capital city of the Jewish people. And all of those overtures that we make to Jerusalem and the yearning that Jews have for Jerusalem is only as a holy city, not as a capital city. And because it's a holy city, it doesn't matter who has sovereignty over it. Jerusalem is just as holy and just as much Jerusalem, whether it's under the auspices of the Turks or the Romans or the British or whoever. It's important to know that the Zionists were the ones that started this business of the capital of the Jewish people, and it's an idea that conflicts directly with the teachings of Judaism. At Mount Sinai in the desert, the Torah says, the Bible says about us, Hayom hazeh niyeh la'am. That's when we became a people. The Jewish people aren't a people because of a land. We're not a people because of a language. We're not a people because of a culture. We're a religion, and when we were deputized into the religion, when we accepted the religion given to us by God, that's when we became the Jewish people. We had no land, no territories, we had no capital city. And in fact, our commentators say the reason why God gave the Jews the Torah in a desert before they went into the Holy Land was in order to teach them that land, country, has nothing to do with your Jewishness. Your Jewishness is because you accept the religion. A couple of years ago, the Pope went to visit Netanyahu, and Netanyahu's bragging to the Pope, this is where Jesus lived in this land, and he spoke Hebrew here. So the Pope corrected him. The Pope said, no, Aramaic. And Pope was right. Netanyahu says, yeah, but he understood Hebrew. Well, maybe he did, but Hebrew was never the national language of the Jewish people. It was a holy language, just like the land of Israel was a holy land. Oh, by the way, if you see the clip and you don't know which of the two people talking is Netanyahu and which is the Pope's the one wearing the yarmulke. Even if we were to pretend that the Jewish people have a capital, that would have nothing to do with whether Jerusalem should be the capital of Israel, because Israel's not the Jewish people. Israel has nothing to do with the old Jewish Commonwealth. It's a country that was created in 1948. When you hear the Israelis or the Zionists talk about how Jerusalem has a connection with the Jewish people for 2,000 years, 3,000 years, 4,000 years, it's all true, but that doesn't translate to, well, therefore Jerusalem has to be part of Israel. People think that Israel is some kind of continuation of a Jewish government, but it's not. It's a completely different form of government, completely different values, completely different ideology, and completely different people. These are not religious Jews that are running the country. These are atheists. And yet, the Israeli prime ministers from Ben-Gurion all the way up to Netanyahu use the Bible as an excuse for ownership of the land. Ben-Gurion, he says the mandate is not our Bible, but the Bible is our mandate. This is a man that didn't believe the Bible was given by God. He didn't believe God ever spoke to prophets. He didn't believe it at all. Neither does Benjamin Netanyahu. It says in the Bible, watch the Sabbath to keep it holy. Netanyahu doesn't refrain from work on the Sabbath. It says not to eat non-kosher food in the Bible. Does Netanyahu do that? No. There is nothing holy in the Bible that Netanyahu cares about. The only thing he cares about is his land. Restorationist Protestants, we call them evangelical Christians today, they existed hundreds of years before any Jewish Zionist was ever born. And because the evangelicals, the restorationists, had great influence in Britain, and Britain had the mandate, the Zionists very, very much adopted the Christian evangelical interpretation of the Bible, and that's what they use today. You'll find that Benjamin Netanyahu sometimes even espouses Christian evangelical interpretations of the Bible over the Jewish ones. A number of years ago, Netanyahu spoke at the site of the Auschwitz concentration camp, and he mentioned a prophecy in the book of Yecheskel about how the prophets saw dried bones rising from the ground and growing flesh and becoming live again. And Netanyahu said that that prophecy is fulfilled with the state of Israel, because the Jews were dried bones, and now they grew flesh, and they're real people again. This interpretation is not found anywhere in any Jewish source, because in Judaism, this is impossible. But for over a century, This has been a Christian evangelical interpretation. The Zionists, when they talk about the Bible, they're not talking about the Judaic version of Judaism and Jewishness. They're talking really about the Christian evangelical version. Netanyahu has no right to claim that his state is mine. I was born in America. My father was born in Poland. My mother's family is from England. We have nothing to do with Israel. We're Jews. We're observant Jews. We're religious Jews. I wear a yarmulke. Netanyahu doesn't. I keep the Shabbos. Netanyahu doesn't. And Israel is not my nation state in the slightest. This is a unilateral claim of the Israelis, of the Zionists, and it's an assault on my religion. So too, the claim that Jerusalem is the capital of the Jewish people because it transforms the Jewish people from a religious identity to a national identity, to a political identity. And it's an assault on my religion when Netanyahu says that because Jerusalem is so connected to the Jewish people, therefore it must be part of the state of Israel. Jerusalem's holiness, Jerusalem's value to the Jewish people has nothing to do with who owns it, and it certainly has no reason to be part of the state of Israel.